As we wandered the streets in the daylight, we took in the fascinating sights. I saw something I never thought possible: a fat elf. It was almost unfathomable to me. There were a number of slightly pudgy elves, but this merchant, selling an array of bread, had a gut that would make Santa proud. I couldn't resist and stopped at his street stall. The smell of his fresh bread was wonderful, and maybe he partook of his own wares too much. Mavaith bought 6 long loaves with nuts and cheese baked into the top. I shook my head as Mavaith paid the exorbitant sum of 6 silver for the bread. I chastised him for his weakness. "Mavaith, you really need to keep the ring on." Instead of responding with his mouth full, he handed me a loaf. I was tempted and tried the still warm bread. The crunchy exterior was rich, sweet, and savory. The fluffy interior nearly melted in my mouth. This was definitely not normal flour. "What is this made of?" I asked as I quickly took another bite. This was closer to a dessert than a bread. The fat elf winked at me. "It is my personal secret mix of 3 different flours and my family's yeast. But the real secret is basting the loaves with goat butter when they are close to finish to give it the crunchy shell." The baker then went into a 10-minute speech on the intricacies of his craft. It went way over my head, but we listened while we ate our loaves. I guessed that when you had centuries to master a craft, even something as simple as baking, you made it as complex as possible to challenge yourself. I couldn't argue with the end product. At Mavaith's insistence, I purchased and stored a dozen loaves in my dimensional space so they would remain fresh. The fat elf didn't look overly surprised at my use of a dimensional space and even kindly directed us to a bathhouse. The bathhouse was not as ornate as its Telhaian counterparts, and it cost 2 silver coins for each of us. I had accumulated a lot of filthy clothes in my dimensional space, and it was time for a reckoning. Unfortunately for the elven bath attendants, they would be dealing with my fouled laundry. I didn't include the clothes that were soaked in blood and paid extra for a double wash. Although many elves in the city were dressed in thin fabrics that left little to the imagination, open nudity appeared taboo in elven culture. The bathrooms were private, and we didn't see any other patrons. Large individual brass tubs were filled with heated, scented water, and we were able to remove the screens between 2 of these tubs. Still, the elven attendants seemed to shy away from looking at our naked bodies. I sighed as I sank into the scented water, Mavaith following directly after in his tub. Even though the tubs seemed large, Mavaith's knees still jutted high over the rim, and his hips were snug, making it difficult for him to scrub himself. The water was laced with a fragrant oil that was absorbed into my skin. Smelling like fragrant flowers was not ideal for trackers and hunters like Mavaith and me. But it was a welcome vanity after being among sailors for a week. I shared some mouthwash with Mavaith and trimmed my hair and black beard. I was growing accustomed to having a beard, but grooming it and shaving my cheeks was a chore with the straight razor. When our clothes were returned clean and dry, we left the bathhouse, leaving a sizable tip for the workers who would have to scrub our filth from the copper tubs. Mavaith was studying his fingernails and sniffing his hand as we walked the city. "I can see why you are always talking about getting clean. I can't remember the last time my hands didn't smell. Even my fingernails are clean." He held out his left hand for me to inspect, but I batted it away, unsure if he was serious. We circled the city just to explore a little and to satisfy my hound training. Walking the walled perimeter was too suspicious, but seeming to wander the streets shouldn't draw more attention than we already did. We were being watched. I didn't know if it was because Mavaith was a curiosity. We did find Sanko's portal stone, so we returned to the adventurer's hall. I went to collect Ginger. The stable hand had gotten me a large, worn, dark brown leather saddle for her, and it was hanging in her stall. Upon inspection, I found it to be of fine quality and well worth the gold coins I had given her to procure it. The saddle blanket was new, dark gray, and very soft, which would prevent chafing. A large delivery of hay and grain was nearby, and I assumed it was what I had ordered. It was also of the highest quality, and something I wouldn't have expected to receive in the Empire. I confirmed no one was around before moving it all to my dimensional space. As I saddled Ginger, I found the stable hand had already adjusted the cinches for Ginger and for my size, so the process went quickly. I just needed to lengthen the reins a notch and set the stirrup length. Ginger was patient throughout. Maybe she was looking forward to carrying me around again, as long as I paid her apple tax. Mavis nodded appreciatively. "Gina looks good." He walked over and rubbed her neck as she preened a little in her new saddle and tack. "Let's head to the portal before the stable hand returns." I left 2 silver coins for her excellent work. I had discovered that tipping was not unusual in Essenham, but it was not expected. I mostly wanted to leave before she returned and inquired as to where all the grain and hay had gone. As we walked toward the upper city, Maveth still drew a lot of stares. He was a minor celebrity, with children rushing into the street to catch a glimpse of him as he passed. For all Maveth's humility, he wasn't fazed by the attention, and waved to the elven children, who returned the gesture. When we reached the gates of a walled-in courtyard, 4 elven guards halted us until we announced ourselves. They did a cursory inspection of what we were carrying, checked our guild medallions against their log, and then allowed us inside. An array of individuals and carts was milling about the courtyard. Ginger yanked on the reins briefly as she wanted to go meet a large white stallion on the far side. Her warhorse training caused her to calm down after I gave her reins a single pull. Most of the people here were elves dressed in a variety of styles. A few humans huddled together around a large cart, and I assumed they were merchants. There was a lone halfling sitting atop an isolated cart, struggling to stay awake. Maveth interrupted my people watching. "Where is the portal?" he asked in Telian. A dwarf, or maybe a large halfling, huffed nearby and was clearly irritated, needing to vent. He spoke Elvish as he ranted. "Elves don't use portals, friend Goliath. Look at the stones. There is a teleportation spell, form anchor, embedded there. Elves don't have enough good displacement mages to make a portal network possible. Had to wait 6 days for this transport, and then they only gave me a day's warning to get ready." A blonde elf woman in drab gray clothes nearby felt the need to join the conversation, and her pale blue eyes sparkled. "I hear the elven mages succeed most of the time. Always a risk that the mage sends the group too fairer, too high." The elf was practically laughing at making the dwarf uncomfortable. I noted 2 city guards standing just a few feet from the elven woman, and quickly deduced she was our mage. "And how proficient are you with your teleportation magic, Master Mage?" I used the elven honorifics for someone of a higher station than me, even though this was not a formal occasion. She smiled and tapped her chin in thought as the dwarf made to disappear into the crowd, realizing he had insulted the elf who was sending us to Arteria. This will be my 97th sending from Sanko to Arteria. I have only failed twice. "The odds are pretty good then," I replied respectfully, in Elvish with a smile, sensing she was teasing us. "Here I thought you would be more fun to tease. Adventurer me 2 failed attempts were during my centering training. Only 1 pig was killed, but that was a decade ago." She walked up to Ginger, her guards following, and stroked the horse's neck appreciatively. "Are you the adventurer's guildmaster Theoda's bartered passage for?" she asked conversationally. "Is there more than 1 Goliath in Sanko?" I asked, being a bit cheeky. The elven mage was not embarrassed. "I suppose not," she said in broken Telian. I think she was trying to demonstrate she knew of our origins. I was not concerned yet, and kept speaking Elvish. "What is different in teleportation compared to using a portal stone?" As with anyone proud of their work, the elf gave a lengthy explanation. "A portal creates a gate between 2 points. It costs a lot of ether to keep open, but it is much safer than teleportation magic since both points are linked. The issue is that it requires a displacement mage at each end of the gate with sufficient ether to keep the gate open. I lock onto an anchor stone I am familiar with and shift everything inside the spell form to that anchor stone, hundreds of miles away. If I hit my target, the air around the spell form in Arteria will be pushed away instantly, causing a booming sound. If anyone is inside the target area when I teleport us, they will likely be killed." I nodded. Impressive. Sounds like an easy way to assassinate someone. Perhaps. However, defenses against teleporting are simple, and if there is too much mass to displace on the other end, I will get a massive backlash and risk burning my channels. Also, the teleporting mage must be intimately familiar with the destination and needs to include themselves in the teleportation. The disgruntled dwarf mentioned that there are not many displacement mages in Essenham. The magic affinity is rare in elves, and many of my specialty have killed themselves during a relocation. She finished with Ginger and stepped back. A fine warhorse. I need to finish my preparations. After the stories I heard about you, I thought you would be different. I didn't have a chance to ask what stories she had heard about me, as her guards shielded her while she prepared. Mavis moved off to talk to the halfling on the wagon, and I mounted Ginger to walk her a little and feel out my new saddle. Before I knew it, one of the elven guards asked everyone to move inside the spell form. Another guard walked the perimeter and barked. If you want to get there in one piece, make sure all your body parts are inside the outer circle. The golden-haired elf mage remained in the center of the formation, with 4 guards keeping people at a distance while she worked. I had enough experience now to feel the ether saturating the metal spell form we were standing on. I could feel the ether coming from deep in the earth, not from the mage. Just as I was puzzling out that she was tapping into a ley line, the air gained a strong scent of ozone, and there was brief darkness before the sky and surrounding walls shifted. Lazy clouds moved above us, and the sun had jumped to a new location in the sky. The courtyard walls were much higher and made of a darker stone. Large trees extended high in the sky, reminding me of the hearth tree in Caelora. The trees were not alone, as stone structures challenged some of the trees for dominance in the skyline. The ozone scent dissipated, and the familiar scent of salt air replaced it. We had moved 400 miles across Esenham, all the way to the opposite coast. The mage returned to my side as the others started moving toward guards dressed in off-yellow uniforms. As she moved past me, she said, "I will see you in the morning, adventurer. I am your ride to Gramney." Before Mavith and I could move for the exit ourselves, a tall man in plate armor approached us. The armor was polished, but there was almost no sound as he moved. His confident gait, chiseled jaw, and hard eyes told me he had seen his fair share of combat. Mavith moved to my side, sensing a confrontation. I thought I could see the top of a guild medallion hanging around the man's neck. He gave me something like a salute, his sword arm touching his opposite shoulder in deference. "Eric Marco and Mavith Stoneskin. I am Knight Banner Cordin Locusta of the Duchy of Manch. I am here to escort you to the Adventurers' Hall." "Why do we need an escort?" I asked, somewhat concerned. "The Arteria Guild Master would like to speak with you, and has rooms ready for you. I will accompany you to Gramney in the morning to make sure you deliver your message," the warrior stated flatly. There was clearly more going on here than I was privy to. I looked up to Mavaith, who shrugged. The others who had come with us had almost cleared the courtyard now. Not wanting to create a scene, I followed Cordon out of the courtyard. Our armored escort walked briskly through the city, not giving us much time to take in the sights. Just like Sanko, the Esenham capital of Arteria was meticulously clean. There was a greater grandeur to the buildings as well, but the architecture still mirrored the other elven city, with its graceful curvature and lack of sharp angles on all the structures. Dark, glossy wood panels adorned the roofs of most buildings. A number of the buildings also extended high into the sky, competing with 4 hearth trees that I guessed marked the corners of the city. These hearth trees, however, could not compete with the grandeur of the one in Caelora. Perhaps these trees were younger, or their growth had been controlled. Mavith still received his fair share of stares, but they were more in passing than intense study. I guessed this was since he was not as unique here. Elves dominated the streets, but humans, halflings, dwarves, and even the occasional orc and catkin walked among them. I tried not to gawk, but still, my head could not help turning to watch the unfamiliar races pass. 2 local city guards escorted a large reptilian man matching Mavith in height. These city guards had off-yellow uniforms, differing from the pea-green uniforms in Sanko. Each of the elven cities was ruled by a regent and maintained its own martial force. From what I had learned about Esenham customs, the long-lived soldiers and guards were trained individually, not as a unit. This meant they did poorly when forming large armies, which put them at a disadvantage against organized armies like the Tellians. "Are there any Goliaths in the city?" Mavaith's deep voice asked our escort. "There is a delegation in the Court of Regents. Maybe 4 Goliaths, if I recall. I have only been to court once, and there are delegations from most nations in Dizia," the knight said helpfully. "From Stone Mountain Island?" Mavaith asked hopefully. The knight slowed for a few steps, thinking. "No, the Blackwood, I think." Mavith's excitement quickly diminished. Maveth turned to me to explain. There is a small city of Goliaths on the other continent. The Stone Mountain Island clans have little contact with them, even though they are just a day's sail away. They have different values from those of the clans. The knight turned slightly, clearly interested in learning more, but held his tongue when Maveth didn't elaborate further. We soon found ourselves at the Adventurers' Hall, but I would have been content to explore the city. It was a modest structure, 2 stories and mostly of dark granite. It stood in the shade of one of the hearth trees. The entrance was a massive Tace wood door that was engraved with the guild's branching tree symbol. Corden led us around back to the stables, and I handed off Ginger's care. Corden's impatience led us immediately through a back door. The smell of food and ale mingled with the sound of stringed instruments and a melodic voice. It was one of the few doors I had seen that Maveth was not required to duck under since I had met him. A standard-looking inn's common room greeted us. Tables were filled with elves, humans, and 1 pair of dwarves. 2 elves strummed instruments while a third crooned a soft melody in Elvish. Maveth got some curious glances, but no one openly stared. I could tell from experience that these men and women were combat-seasoned. Corden didn't hesitate as he walked across the room, passing a long bar lined with shelves of colorful bottles and staffed by a young-looking, female elven barkeep who smiled in welcome as we passed. The knight was headed toward the back room, and we followed. It felt like we were being dragged along. I wanted to relax and take in the sights of this unfamiliar city. Also, my hound training was screaming at me to be better prepared for these impromptu encounters. There was no choice now but to find out what the guildmaster wanted. We followed Corden to a large, spacious office where an elf with long, gray-streaked black hair sat behind a desk that was far too big for him. Dozens of orderly stacks of paper covered the desk as he worked on a folder in front of him, not looking up. Corden, having completed his task, announced us, "The 2 from Sanko are here." When the guildmaster waved his hand in acknowledgement, Corden left, closing the door behind him. The guildmaster didn't look up as he read and then put a quill to paper. He wrote for almost 10 minutes before putting down the implement. I sensed that he was testing our patience on purpose, so I waited. When he looked up, I could read his eyes. He was not happy to see us. He studied Maveth first before studying me. "You are the Telhian." It was an accusation, and it was easy to tell he did not like the Empire. I am not Telhian. I came from the Empire, but I am not a citizen. A flash of surprise crossed his face and quickly disappeared. I assumed it was due to my proficiency in Elvish rather than my statement. Maveth stirred uncomfortably next to me as tension hung in the air. His eyes narrowed. "But you were of the Legion?" I began to see where his anger was rooted. I shouldn't be surprised that he had learned I was a legionnaire. Desdemona probably included it in a report to the guild. I responded carefully. I was conscripted, yes. I took the opportunity to flee in the confusion of the war. He shook his head negatively, still discontented with my presence. "And Guildmaster Theodas raised you to silver for a single battle." It was more a statement than a question. His voice remained hard. "I have dealt with your ilk before, ex-legionnaires who say they are abandoning the Empire and seeking sanctuary in the guild." His hard eyes looked through me. I sensed some aether in the air, but my bone inscriptions didn't react. He continued, "Most of you are spies. If I find your loyalty to your first citizen masters has not been broken, I will see you excised from the guild and have a bounty placed on your head." His threat was stated in a cold, flat tone that sent a chill through me, not so much from the words, but from the power I sensed from this elf. It reminded me of Triliorn, the summoner. Maveth didn't like his tone and defended me. "Eric is no spy. Friend Goliath, you should keep better company. Life is too short to be caught in the Empire's web," the guildmaster replied coolly. "You are not to leave the guild hall while you are in Arteria. You are not to speak to anyone until you leave in the morning. That is an order, as you are on an official guild assignment. You are dismissed." He pulled another stack of paper toward him to continue his work, ignoring us. I was worried about the guildmaster because we would have to pass through Arteria again, on our way to the Bhutan Caliphate. But I didn't think it was the right time to use my minuscule powers of persuasion to change his opinion of me. When we exited the office, A young elf awaited us to escort us to our room. The plain room had 2 beds, and the only positive aspect of our confinement was that they were big enough for Maveth. There was no window or hearth. After talking with the guildmaster, this felt more like a cell. Since we had not been given a meal, I handed Maveth a burrito as I prepared to get some sleep. He was clearly still reclimating to his ring as he munched away loudly. The beds were not uncomfortable, but an acidic scent hung in the air. Maybe the lingering scent of a cleaning solution. Maveth was asleep before me, and I utilized the Dreamscape amulet to review the little information I had about the Duchy of Manch. In the morning, we were escorted by Knight Corden back to the courtyard for the teleportation to Gramney. The elven displacement mage smirked knowingly when we arrived. She definitely knew more about me than she had let on, and was probably aware of the frosty reception I had received. She didn't seem to share the guildmaster's antipathy toward me. It made me concerned that perhaps her interest in me was based on the number of artifacts Maveth and I declared at customs, or maybe the existence of my dimensional space. I couldn't resist not knowing and walked up to her, her guards becoming alert and their hands resting on their sheathed weapons. I produced and handed her an apple, which she took after a moment. A dungeon apple, I explained. Ginger neighed in dismay while Maveth held her reins. I was giving away her apples, so her distress was understandable. I assumed the mage had been informed about the crate of apples I had shown at customs, but judging from her surprise, maybe not. She inspected it for a while before taking a bite. Her eyes quickly widened, and she lost some decorum as she devoured the offering. I could tell that just like Zyna, the elven mage had received some euphoric effect from the dungeon ether saturating the apple. She regained some composure. Where? Was all she asked as she licked the juice from her lips. A dungeon in the Empire, I hedged, not telling her more. How difficult will it be to port back from Gramney to Arteria? I figured I had gained enough goodwill from the apple to exchange it for some information. The duchy does not have displacement mages capable. Myself and one other share the duties among the Essenhem's cities. Between us, we usually port to Gramney once a month, but we have been off schedule. I will return to Essenhem with my guards immediately after arriving. Another return trip may be some time away, the elf woman explained. Maveth became uneasy. I had told him we would only spend a few days in Gramney to drop off my passengers and search for Castile. He announced his concerns. The halfling trader said the Essenhem war effort was interfering with the schedule. The war is of Telhyan machinations. We warned the Emperor to leave what was buried. Buried. He did not listen. The golden-haired mage said tersely, "We reclaimed the Isle of Amatalhos peaceably. We reclaimed the Isle of Amatalhos peaceably. No one was killed, and we allowed those who wished to leave to do so. We only stepped foot on Telhyan soil when he did not heed our warnings." What warning? Why is unearthing Atlantium, the city of the Titans, bad? I asked politely. The mage was more shocked than I thought a centuries-old woman should be. Her jaw flapped for a moment. You are remarkably well informed. Still, her words had difficulty coming, and I assumed it was because she did not know the answer to my question. Humans live brief lives. They forget the ancient histories. When she did not go on, I asked, "Will you enlighten me then?" She gathered her thoughts. The Titans destroyed the world once with their magics. Whatever is buried there might do so again. No man, elf, dwarf, or orc should possess such power, she said vehemently. Telhyans have long abused their power and cannot be trusted with more. And the elves have never abused their power? I questioned her. But her face immediately darkened. I thought this would lead to a cordial discussion, but she ended the conversation there. I need to have message sendings sent to make sure our arrival zone is clear. Her guards interposed themselves between us, and I felt I had angered her. I was certain elven history had its share of tyrants, but she wouldn't listen to me. Personally, I guess the elves just wanted the power buried in Atlantium for themselves otherwise. The timing of their annexation of the Isle of Amatalhos didn't make sense. When we were alone, Maveth asked worriedly, "We are not going to wait a month in Gramney for the elven displacement mage, are we?" He had been very patient with our progress toward the Bhutan Caliphate. This trip to Gramney was the first part of our journey that would take us in the wrong direction. I made him a promise. No, if we cannot find transport after a week, we will make our way on foot. He nodded thankfully and relaxed. I would not have shown the same patience if it had been one of my sisters. The circle was even more crowded than it had been the last time. Most people looked like traders, with oversized packs or densely packed carts. The elven mage worked as the group pressed together, her eyes darting to me more than once. I felt the ether in the metal runes beneath our feet build to a crescendo as they drew from the ley line. And after a brief period of darkness, we were standing hundreds of miles away. Gramney was not what I expected. Our arrival was heralded with horns and soldiers surrounding the runic stonework upon which we arrived. They wore dark blue uniforms and tabards emblazoned with a rearing golden unicorn. Knight Corden's impatience and recognition had us quickly past the guards. We fell in step with him, and I asked, "Are we heading to the Adventurers Guild? Where else would we be headed?" "You have your missive to be delivered, and it will complete my escort," he replied somewhat impatiently. "We are a guild assignment for you," Maveth asked, interested. "Yes, Guildmaster Theodas contacted me. I am to ensure you don't cause trouble and then get you safely to the guild hall in Gramney." He paused and pointed at a large wooden building, the guild hall. "I have to check in with my baron, but I will be in the guild hall later tonight to collect my payment. Perhaps we can share a drink then." He saluted with his fist and walked away. I secured Ginger in the stables before entering. The guild hall reminded me of the one in Tella, albeit with many more adventurers. My eyes passed over the crowd, looking for an orc, but I was disappointed. Maveth drew some curious stares, but no one moved to engage us. I walked slowly past the posting board and noted many of the postings centered around the dungeon outside the city. Mostly, local restaurants wanted meat, fungi, or flora found within. As we reached the counter, an older woman with creased smile lines on her face asked our business. "We have a missive from Guildmaster Theodas in Sanko." I placed the sealed and rolled document on the counter, expecting to be brought before the guildmaster. "Very good. If it is tied to a posting, please present your guild medallions," she said politely while maintaining her smile. Her language was close to Telhian Latin, but she had a strong accent, and I needed to focus to understand her. "Do I not need to hand it to him in person?" I asked. "You could wait. He's currently training in the dungeon and will be back late tomorrow," she replied patiently. "I see. You can hold it then." I had already received my reward in the form of transport to Gramney. Even if something extra was attached to completing this delivery, I doubted it was substantial. I turned away from the counter and looked through the postings with Maveth. Maveth asked me questions as we read. "Are we going to take an assignment?" "No, just trying to act normal. We are not even going to stay in the guild hall." I checked to make sure we were not being overheard. "It is time to unload my passengers." Maveth nodded a little too excitedly for my liking. Gramney was less clean than the elven cities. The fetid sewer under the streets was noticeable in the air near the street grates, and the alleys were filled with vagrants and debris. Still, the city felt safe enough with cheerful pairs of guards walking the streets. It took us half a day to find acceptable accommodations in a wealthy district. The inn was called Crescent Crossroads. I thought it might be the most luxurious inn in all of Gramney. I rented an entire floor suite with 5 rooms and a massive common room connecting them. There was also a private bath with running water, which may have been why I selected this particular inn. It was time to consume the Apex water essence and unlock the affinity. Having a bath nearby would be welcome. Maveth and I were in one of the rooms with 2 large beds. Maveth sat on the bed across from me, bouncing and shaking the frame, as he had never seen springs on a bed before. I could only imagine what the people on the floor below us were thinking. "It's too soft and bouncy. I don't think I could sleep." His large mass was sinking into the soft mattress every time he landed. If he lay down, it would probably swallow him. "You can always sleep on the floor, Maveth," I said, irritated. I had paid a large gold coin for 4 nights, and that was supposedly a 2 gold discount, according to the innkeeper. At least Ginger's stabling was included in the cost. With a thud, I dropped his pack onto the floor for my dimensional space. He bounced a few more times, considering, before kneeling and starting to unpack his large bedroll. While Maveth set up his sleeping accommodations on the floor, I considered how I would release my passengers. I had 4 people to extract a mother and her 2 children, and a first citizen mage. The wisest choice was to bring the mother out first and get her acclimated so she could calm her children when they came out next. The mage was probably going to be trouble, but at least she was dosed with Magebane poison. Maevith, why don't you see if there are any orc adventurers in the guild hall? Even though he knew the plan was to add an orc to our group to serve as a guide, he ground his teeth a little. I don't need help with the mother and children. You can meet them when you come back. The truth was, I didn't want them to be frightened by Maevith. If you didn't know Goliaths were honorable people, Maevith was rather intimidating. He finally let out a long sigh of disappointment. Okay, I will inquire. I will bring back dinner for us and them. He had been drooling at all the food carts as we searched for an inn. After Maevith left, I went to the most opulent room in the suite. This was clearly for a lord. The large window offered a marvelous view overlooking the square, which featured a massive statue of a Pegasus in flight with an armored knight on its back. From Hearn, I knew that was impossible. Pegasi were rare creatures, but they were more gliders than flyers, and couldn't get aloft with any significantly weighted rider. As far as aerial steeds, griffins were larger and more powerful, but still required slight riders to avoid fatigue. I briefly wondered how Raelia was doing. Her griffin egg should have hatched by Nowar. At least I hoped it had hatched. It would have been cruel to give her an egg with a dead embryo. I pulled the window's blinds closed, lit the room's 3 oil lamps, and produced my glowstone. I placed clothes for the 3 on the bed with the jewelry the mother had packed herself. When she appeared, she crumpled to the floor. I had given her 2 oblivion pills, and to her, that had happened just moments ago. I placed her body on the bed and untied her. She was quite beautiful, with silky blonde hair, vibrant skin, and delicate facial features. At that moment, I realized I had never learned her name. Centurion Sergius never mentioned it, and she never told me. I remembered that her children's names were Marius and Clara. I watched her sleeping, her chest rising and falling, then turned away, suddenly feeling creepy. Maybe I could wake her. I shook her shoulders strongly until her groggy eyelids fluttered. She was going to have to fight off the effects. She had difficulty speaking, and her eyes wouldn't focus on my face, but she had some recollection of what had happened. Where? She asked, confused. You and your children are in Gramney and the Duchy of Manch, I said softly. She was slow to process what I said, but memories suddenly came back to her. She tried to stand but failed to do so, falling to the floor in a heap. She was drowsy and fighting the effects of the oblivion pills. It was stupid for me to wake her. I should have had patience and let her wake up on her own. As I helped her onto the bed, she pushed me away. Don't touch me. She then remembered I had her children, so she needed to be polite to me. I can manage, she said more civilly. I let her get on the bed and I could tell she was fighting off sleep. 2 oblivion pills were a lot for her slight frame. Just rest for now. You are safe, as are your children, I promise. Her eyes told me she didn't believe me. But sleep soon took her. Maevith knocked a few hours later, while I watched over my victim. I waved him in, and he brought a feast in numerous canvas bags. He must have hit every vendor's stall in the city. Mini pies baked on formed wax leaves, different types of skewered meat and vegetables, 3 different kinds of bread, and a bag of cookies with jam baked into them. The crumbs on his clothes showed that he had done a lot of sampling on his expedition. After unloading his haul, he stood over the woman, studying her and then looking at me. She is pretty. The children, not yet. Not yet. She is working through the effects of 2 oblivion pills. Maevith nodded in understanding and looked at all the food he had brought. I asked, any luck with an orc guide? He chewed his cheek unhappily. There are 3 orc adventurers in the city. I have 2 addresses. The 3rd is guarding a trade caravan and will return in a month. It would be best if you interviewed them, he stated with a note of pleading. Maevith did not talk quietly. The woman fluttered her eyes and Maevith leaned over her, smiling. She screamed as her eyes focused on his gray, beaming face. It was just as I feared. I pulled away the confused Maevith and soothed her. It is fine. Maevith is a Goliath. A good Goliath. Seeing me, her scream died. I am sorry. She was still disoriented and slightly terrified. I motioned Maveth to the door in case someone came to investigate, but it was a short, piercing scream, so maybe it went unnoticed. "What is your name?" I asked with a friendly smile. "You don't know my name?" She suddenly sounded exasperated and exhausted. "Viridia Janus, wife of Milo Janus. Are you not the one who kidnapped me? Are my children here?" She had not seen my face, evidently, but she should have recognized my voice. She sat up, taking in the luxurious room. She was shaking but hiding her fear well. "Give me a moment, and I will check on Clara. You can change out of your nightwear." I pointed at the pile of clothes. "The jewelry you packed is there as well." Viridia blinked, her vision clear, fighting off the fading effects of the oblivion pills. I moved into the common room, closing the door behind me. I went into the smallest room, probably for servants, and pulled the girl onto the bed. She had been sleeping peacefully when I pulled her into my dimensional space months ago. Parts of her mattress, sheets, and blankets appeared with her. If I had placed her into my space by touching her, I might have been able to differentiate the various fabrics from the girl. The girl was a miniature version of her mother, and sleeping heavily, oblivious to her fate. I removed the cut fabric gently to hide the evidence of my powerful spell form. I was going to get her mother, but didn't need to. Viridia Janus came through the door, ran to her daughter, and started crying into her chest. Clara stirred and asked her mother what was wrong. The mother just wrapped her arms around her daughter and hugged her to her body while standing. I guessed the girl's age to be 10, not past accepting affection from her mother. Viridia had clearly doubted my sincerity in guaranteeing the safety of her children. The young girl hugged her mother back, confused and on the verge of tears herself because she didn't know what was going on. "Where are we? Where is Marius? Is father home?" the girl asked her mother, who cradled her to her chest. Viridia looked to me for answers as she continued to hold her child against her chest. "Marius is well. I do not know the fate of Milo Janus," I told them truthfully. Maveth stood in the doorway, taking up the entire doorframe. Clara noticed him for the first time, her eyes widening in shock. She was not afraid, though. After Viridia's reaction, Maveth was more hesitant. "I have some food in the other room," he offered, pointing awkwardly. "Mommy, is that a giant? Did you get me a giant for my birthday?" The young girl asked excitedly. "Of course, because they were all out of unicorns," Viridia said sarcastically. The young girl didn't catch the sarcasm and pushed away from her mother's hold to approach Maveth. Viridia calmed down and whispered, "How did we get to Gramney? And where is my son?" I would do my best to keep my secrets, and I tried to distract her with past events. "I smuggled you here through a portal. The Emperor is dead, and the Telian Empire is besieged from 4 sides. I suggest you and your family make a new life here with your wealth. If I had known you were telling me the truth, I would have opened the secret vault in the villa." She sighed resignedly. "Still, we have trade assets and agents in the Duchy of Manch that were out of the Emperor's reach, and the olive field should be fruiting in a year or 2. Milo can build his network again." The way she was talking, she still thought her husband was alive, but knowing Centurion Sergius, that was unlikely. Her emerald eyes slowly gained life and sparkled with hope. She was accepting her fate and slowly formulating a way to survive. Getting her son out was slightly trickier. When I stashed him away, he had been awake and walking onto the villa's balcony. I was in another small room when Marius appeared. He was sweaty, barefoot, and shirtless. His confusion quickly turned into an attack as he lunged at me. I sidestepped his tackle attempt and called for his mother as I threw a wet towel at him. Viridia rushed into the room and didn't cry this time as she wrapped up her confused son. She was calming him as I stepped out. I checked on Maveth and the girl. They were in the Lord's suite having something akin to a tea party on the floor. Clara was asking Maveth a stream of questions while she plated food for him. He seemed happy, and I noticed the checkers board Desdemona had given him to his right. So I left him to his fate. Did I do the right thing? Yes. Would this goodwill come back to bite me in the ass eventually? Probably. I still had one passenger, but this had taken a lot out of me. The first citizen was a mage and much more dangerous than the mother and children. I entered our room and rested on the bed while I ran the Apex water essence across the back of my knuckles. It was a fascinating essence with the appearance of shifting water inside. Maveth arrived in our room late at night. "I hope you let her win a game or 2, I said, smirking. "I let her win them all," he said loudly, then quieted, worried the girl might have heard. "I'm going to use this tonight," I said, tossing the sphere lightly in my hand. "Can you watch over me and help me clean up after?" "Of course," Maveth said agreeably. "Let me first make something to cover my mouth and nose." Maveth stayed in the bathroom with me as I prepared to take the essence to unlock the water affinity. He had watched over me in the shimmering labyrinth when I unlocked a new affinity, so he knew how painful, messy, and foul it would be. We had wet blankets, and the modest tub was filled with water for me to scrub right after. Maveth had prepared everything but looked concerned and reluctant. "Eric, are you sure you want to do this?" I held up the Apex water essence to him. "All you, big guy. I don't need any more." He shook his head and backed away as he held up his hands. I shrugged, stripped down to just my loincloth, and lay down on the wet towels. If I had the urge to vomit, a bucket was nearby. We were as prepared as we could be. "Bottoms up." I saluted Maveth and deposited the essence in my mouth. It tasted like sugar water as it dissolved, and I quickly swigged some water from a canteen. Maybe that wasn't very smart, as I would probably throw it up, but my mouth was already cottony. I focused inward and felt the ether spread through my body from my stomach. When it found my aether core, all the water ether flowing through me raced toward it like magnets attracting each other. That was as long as I could focus inward, as every muscle in my body contracted, contorting my body into weird poses. I forced myself into a protective fetal position, thinking I just needed to ride it out for a minute or so. Anyone can deal with intense pain for a minute. My skin burned as a slimy, foul-smelling substance was pushed out my pores. My loincloth was suddenly full of shit and urine, but I didn't remember releasing it. My heart raced, and I panted to catch my breath. This was by far my worst experience. It sounded like I was underwater as Maveth's voice tried to reach me. "Eric, what's wrong?" He sounded a bit panicked. Through clenched teeth, I rasped out, "Should be fine in a minute." "It has been almost half an hour," Maveth said worriedly. "Ah, shit. Well, that sucks." Then I passed out. When I woke, my suffering had not ended. My muscles would not work. Having been seized for too long, the ligaments had been strained, and my muscles were brutalized. I still tried to move, but all I could do was shudder. I moved my head with great difficulty and couldn't see Maveth. Had he abandoned me? No. He wouldn't do that. Crusty acidic salt caked my lips as I tried to speak. My vocal cords were sore and would not work had I been screaming. I tried to channel my healing spell form, but I couldn't control the ether. It felt like sand running through my fingers. Panic welled up inside me as I feared I might have permanently damaged my ability to channel ether. However, it wasn't like the fire in my ether channels when I had burned them. Instead, it was my abused ether core that was not directing the ether as I willed it. I couldn't even focus inward to study the problem, as the pain was too distracting. I fumbled for the lip of the tub, planning to pull myself inside, but stopped. That would be stupid. I might drown if I passed out again. I released the tub, grunting as the floor greeted my face. The door creaked open. "Maveth," I tried to say, but it just came out as a hiss of air. Viridia stood in the doorway, her hand covering her nose and mouth with a wet cloth. Her voice was slightly muffled. "He left to get help. I said I would watch you, but the smell was too foul. I have been waiting just outside the door." I could see her daughter just beyond her. Clara got a whiff of the odor and vomited in the common room. Viridia hissed at her son to help his sister clean the mess. She came in and closed the door behind her. I pointed weakly at the canteen, and she retrieved it and fed the contents to me. I greedily drank it down, coughing because it was so hard to swallow, but realizing I needed the fluids. "How long?" I said with a sore larynx after finishing the remainder of the canteen. "Maveth left perhaps 2 hours ago. Before that, I think he said you passed out an hour ago, or you took something an hour ago. He was frantic. Are you poisoned?" she asked as she took some towels and started rubbing away the crusty film on my skin. "Something like that," I said painfully. I could barely move. I thought the Apex water essence had finished its work and my body had been tempered, or at least my aether core had been. "Your skin is burning up, Eric," Viridia said in a scolding tone only mothers had. Had I even told her my name? Maveth must have given it to her. To her credit, Viridia did not shy away from my foulness as she worked to clean me. "Into the tub," she ordered with a huff, after she had fouled a half-dozen towels. I almost laughed, as the simple act was too much for me. She helped me to my feet, and I fell into the cool water, almost pulling Viridia with me. Water rushed over the side, soaking the woman. It had been warm when I consumed the essence hours ago, but now it was cold and it numbed my aching body. "We will work from the head down," she announced determinedly. She worked on my hair and face, making coughing sounds as she scrubbed. "It would be easier to just shave your head." I looked at her and was about to agree, but she added with a weak smile, "I was kidding. Eventually we will get it all out." The water had turned to a murky brown by the time she finished scrubbing my hair and face. She helped me out of the tub to drain and clean it. I lay on the wooden floor and fell asleep from exhaustion. She roused me softly. "It's clean with fresh water." "Back into the tub," she ordered. We repeated this a third time before the water finally stayed clear. I heard the door to the suite open, and Maveth's heavy footfalls sounded as he rapidly crossed to the bathroom. The door slammed open, and he coughed as he inhaled. "You're awake," he said. "Relieved? I found a healer of mages. Took most of the night, and some convincing to get him to come." His head whipped around, looking behind him, and he thundered out the door and down the stairs, returning with a man in a nightshirt who was sweating heavily. The healer had age lines on his face, which was surprising given his pointed ears. Maveth introduced him awkwardly. "This is Elaro Morlamin. He is the best healer in the city, not the best, but the best for a mage in distress." The healer caught his breath in the doorway, putting his hand over his mouth as he took in the scene. "How many did you consume, boy?" he asked with his hand over his nose. "No time to lie. I have never seen an emergence this extreme in all my considerable years. Just an apex water essence," I said with a dry throat. "Apex?" He sounded impressed but frowned. "How many apex essences? And were they all water? You didn't try to emerge more than one affinity at once. If so, you are lucky to be alive," he said as he moved into the room. Maveth and the healer squeezed out Viridia due to the size of the bathroom, but she was probably glad for some fresher air. Maveth had apparently given the mage healer some background about what I had done. I didn't blame him, as convincing the mage to come here must have been difficult in the middle of the night. "Just one," I said. But the look on his face told me he didn't believe me. The elf knelt at the edge of the tub, a spell forming between his hands as he studied me. The faint etheric lines were traced too quickly for me to follow. His brow furrowed as the spell form completed, and his eyes stared blankly ahead. I could feel my body being violated by the spell form and reflexively tried to resist. The more I tried, the more the pain flared. The elf shook his head, disappointed. "Your ether core is a mess, boy. It is leaking either like a sieve," he muttered to himself in Elvish. "Just one. And I'm the son of a dragon." His hand roamed over my chest, around my heart where my aether core resided. "Why does it still hurt so much?" I asked with some relief, knowing I would heal and beyond caring that Viridia was hovering just beyond the door. "Waste of good apex essences if you ask me," he continued in the local language. "This filth," indicated the soiled towels, "is your body removing anything antithetical to water other in your body." He looked over the bathroom and sighed. "When you first create an affinity aspect on your ether core, it is usually quite bad. Each successive essence is less impactful. By the fifth or sixth essence it calms quite a bit, and you don't even stink." He chuckled, then coughed after breathing in too much. I figured I had completed the entire purification process with one essence due to my convergence spell form. "It wasn't this bad before," I said defensively. I didn't want him to think I was an idiot. I was sliding lower in the tub and forced myself to sit up, wincing at the effort. The elf was shocked. "How many affinities have you unlocked? What fool taught you it was worth unlocking a new affinity, boy? You would need 100 apex essences to learn the simplest spell form. An utter waste for a warrior." He reverted to Elvish to curse me. The foolishness of youth to grasp at what he cannot have. "This is my third," I replied in Elvish. He was momentarily shocked by my words, either because they were Elvish or that I had unlocked 2 other essences, or both. "Third," he said in mild surprise. After regaining his tongue, He was now speaking only in Elvish and ignoring the fact that he had insulted me twice. He created a more complex spell form and entered his examination again. My body still resisted his probing, but I could not stop him. "Your core is complex. How many affinities do you have?" he asked as he continued to inspect me with interest. I weighed the importance of telling him the truth. He was clearly a skilled and probably powerful mage who I knew almost nothing about. But he was my best chance to recover my magic. 13. I replied in Elvish. The elf mage stopped and sat back on his heels away from the tub, stunned. "Are you lying to me, boy?" At least the mage couldn't decipher what affinities I had by his intrusive efforts. I looked him in the eye. "Yes, I am lying. It's actually 14 now if I just added the water affinity." "When can I channel either again?" I asked impatiently. Maybe the elf could heal my injuries, and this folly could be put behind me. He studied me for a long time before responding. "Let me explain. Your core is small. 25 on the scale, maybe." He didn't wait for me to reply. "Your core didn't have enough space to add the water affinity, so it distorted your aether core, fracturing it to make space. Right now, it cannot hold either with the damage, and it is leaking either as fast as it is pulling it in," he sighed, looking even older. "The good news is that it will heal like any physical injury. I just need to seal your core away for a time. It will be unpleasant not to have access to your ether, but find me in 2 weeks, and I will inspect it. If it has recovered enough, I will remove the seal." He shrugged. "Or you can let your aether core leak and eventually collapse and never use magic again. It is, of course, your choice." I had a dozen questions, but Alaro didn't wait and once again invaded my body with his spell, knowing what my choice would be. This time, it felt like he was squeezing my chest, and I couldn't breathe. Then a great emptiness filled me. It was as if my heart was missing, but that organ thudded steadily in my chest. I realized the empty feeling was because I couldn't sense any ether in my body. Either there was none, or my aether sensing required my aether core. The elf mage looked exhausted and stood unsteadily. His nightshirt was soaked in sweat and bath water. "Your Goliath friend knows where I live. Do not try to use either. I have sealed your core, and the protective shell may shatter if you try. Avoid all potions that restore aether as well. Normal healing potions are fine, but use them in moderation." That was why I couldn't heal. My aether core had no ether to funnel through the spell form. "Do we owe you gold?" I asked as I tried to rise. "You can pay me when I see you again. If you encounter difficulties, you can call on me before then," he said as he continued out the door. I was slightly worried. Was there a healer's confidentiality code? Would he figure out what I had done and keep my secret? Melvaith helped me to my bed. Over the next week of bed rest, my body healed fast with the help of 3 Orc Pathfinder potions. But I thought my taste buds had melted off my tongue. After 4 more days, I was walking gingerly outside to get some sun. Melvaith was always at my side, watching over me. It was frustrating to be unable to heal away all my aches and pains with just a focused thought. Viridia had been incredibly helpful over the past 2 weeks, but as soon as I could walk and care for myself, she took her children in the morning and left. Her husband's trading company had a small office in the city. Viridia had been trying to prove her identity, and, during the Truth Seeker's interrogation, had finally established that she was not dead, and that she was Milo, Giannis's wife. Once confirmed, she learned that her husband was dead, and that she had inherited everything: offices and investments in 7 cities, in 4 different nations, a plantation with 500 acres of young olive trees, and 3 merchant ships. There had been 5 ships, but one was missing at sea, and the other had been sold to pay debts. The woman was not at all helpless and planned to run the trading company and to get revenge against the Tellian Empire for having her husband killed. We had gotten close while she cared for me, but nothing physical developed between us, as she was more concerned with protecting her children. During my recovery, Melvaith had been disappointed that I could not retrieve the Dreamscape amulet for him to use, but he shared in Viridia's caretaker duties. Healing mostly naturally had not been fun. Even with my impressive constitution, it had been a week before I could move without pain. Then, over the following days, I gradually began physical training. At first, Viridia's son Marius had hated me. He blamed me for his abduction to a foreign country, and for his father's death. I couldn't blame him. Even his mother explaining that I had actually saved them didn't help. Then, as I worked on my sword forms in the suite, he practically begged me to teach him. Once I agreed, he wouldn't shut up. Marius had wanted to be a legionnaire before the Emperor had targeted his family. Now, he just wanted to fight to defend his mother and sister. It was admirable, and we developed a mentor-mentee friendship. Toward the end of my recovery, he had even started pushing his mother toward me, but I was not a good choice for a surrogate father. And Viridia was grieving the loss of her husband. After almost 2 weeks, I was getting stir-crazy being in the suite, so I walked the streets with Mavis. We had no destination or plan in mind. It was just a chance to get some fresh air. We were also looking for signs of Castile and the company. It had been 3 weeks since I had heard of the death of the Emperor, but I couldn't access the blood compass to see if Castile was closer. Mavis had finally kept his ring on and grumbled about how the smells of the carts did not elicit a reaction from his stomach. We still stopped at most stalls to sample the wares and spend some coppers. Fortunately, I had plenty of coins in the many pouches on the artifact belt. We had just turned down Crafter Street, where woodwrights and metalsmiths worked. The sound of saws and hammers echoed in the air as we walked. Mavis was drawing a fair amount of attention, so I gave him some space to be admired, searching the small shops for something interesting to inspect. At one of the forges, I paused as 2 smiths yelled back and forth. "You are a fool! Just listen to me. You need to fold it and hammer it back to length before folding it again." The familiar woman's voice was unmistakable. "Old woman, out of my forge! I do not need to be instructed by you." A hoarse, angry male voice barked. I stepped into the forge to confirm my guess. A much thinner Ignis stood there, confronting a smith. She was in dirty, baggy clothes. "Let me at it, and I will show you how it is done," Ignis said, arguing with the sooty, thick-armed smith. "It is my forge. Out, or I will call the guard. Go harass another smith," he bellowed at her. Ignis growled but turned away, and took 1 step toward me. Even though it had only been a few months, she looked years older with new lines on her face. Recognition flashed on her face when she saw me. I crafted a smirk. "Hey, Ignis, are you available to make me a new suit of armor?" Ignis cracked a smile. Her front tooth was chipped. "The old fire witch made it then. Where is she? She better have another bottle of that elven wine you gave her. I need to forget some things." I moved closer to keep our conversation private. She didn't make it. At least, I couldn't locate her with my blood compass. Ignis's expression fell at my words. I was curious about how she was tied to the plot to kill the Emperor, so I decided to invite her to join us. "We have a suite at an inn. Plenty of extra rooms if you are interested." She had gotten close enough that her body odor offended me. "We have a bath," I added as a more incentive. She decided to trust me and nodded, but she might not have been in a position to decline my offer given her wretched state. Ignis had a slight limp as she walked back with me. "Why is the Goliath following us?" she asked, jerking her thumb at the looming Mavis 2 steps behind us. "There is a Goliath following us," Mavis said jokingly, turning around to look, chuckling. I was glad he was in a good mood. He had been anxious about being delayed in our quest for the last 2 weeks while I healed. But he never complained. I looked back at Mavis, offering him a smirk. Mavis is a friend. His sense of humor is still in development. We fled the Empire together and joined the Adventurers Guild. "We can talk more after you clean up," I explained to Mavis who Ignis was. Ignis was the best armorer for the Imperial Legion. High Mage Zyna recruited her, and she was part of the conspiracy. I handed Mavis a few large silver coins. "Get Ignis some clean clothes and whatever else she might need." Ignis took a minute to gratefully give Mavis a short list. When we arrived at the suite, Ignis was impressed. "You have done well for yourself. Do you know anyone else who made it?" I answered helplessly. "I don't know who else should be here. I am looking for Castile, but I have been recovering from an injury." "How much did you know about the plot?" I asked seriously. She let out a long, tired sigh. "Enough. I knew enough. I had my own part to play. Zyna warned me to run if things turned to dragon shit after news of the Emperor's death reached Telha. When I learned Antonia was dead, I left immediately. Zyna set up an account for me here at the Grand Duchy Depository, But I was waylaid on the road in Barteradia, and they took my account marker. Now I can't claim a copper of it. I was looking for work when you found me." Ignis didn't continue and excused herself to enter the bathroom. She was a shadow of her former self. I thought the old armorer needed to mourn Zaina and the others who were lost alone. Maveth returned before Ignis emerged. He had a large bundle of clean used clothes, packages of items Ignis had requested, and some food from the street vendors. I knocked and placed the clothes just inside the door. Ignis was still in the tub of heated water and waved me out. "Thank you, but give me another hour. This heated water is doing wonders for my old muscles and joints." Ignis took only half that time before she emerged, looking invigorated. Maveth eagerly offered her the food he had laid out, and we sat in the common room while she stuffed herself. She was clearly hungry and barely chewed her food. She told her tale between bites. I didn't play a large role. I just supplied a few sets of the Imperial armor for those infiltrating the archives. After the news came, the palace grounds were in disarray and there weren't enough legionnaires to keep order. I left the moment I heard about Antonia's death, but the barons were already positioning themselves to grab as much power as possible. I barely made it through the portal to Masha. She had moved from meats to potatoes and finished off her meal with grilled vegetables. She pulled her wet gray hair behind her and tied it. "I feel most sorry for the children. There must have been 400 in classes at the Imperial Palace. Some of them have since found themselves kidnapped for leverage." Ignis sat back, finally satiated. "You need some armor. I need a place to work, and the materials." She smiled tiredly, showing her chipped tooth again. "There probably isn't time. We are headed to the Bhutan Caliphate in a few days. Maveth's sister is being held there. By a warlord," she guessed. "I would go with you if I were 10 years younger." She barked a contrived laugh that told me she wouldn't go even if she was 10 years younger. "Do you know anything about the Caliphate?" I asked, but Ignis was already shaking her head. "Nothing. I talked to an orc ambassador's aide once, but he kept asking me questions about the Imperial Legion. He thought I was an ignorant hammer-swinging bitch and would give up details of our strength." All pretense of joviality was gone. She inhaled and made a request. "If you can spare some coins so I can get some used hammers and tongs and find a place to stay, I would appreciate it." I liked her direct, no-nonsense personality. I laughed, causing her to frown as if she thought I would say no. "Ignis, you can stay here. There are plenty of rooms. How much are your smith's tools?" Most of my coins were inaccessible in the dimensional space, but I had a lot of silver and a few gold coins in my belt. Ignis visibly relaxed. 20 gold for good quality new, 12 gold for used, but I'm sure I can haggle them down to 10 or less. "And how much to rent or own a smithy?" I asked, and her eyebrow rose. She started doing some calculations in her head. "In this city, I don't know the property cost, but in the Empire, a new forge would be a few hundred gold, 500 on the low end. To use a smith's shope a gold a day if he can still work at the same time. If not, 2 gold or more." I dug deep into my pouch, pulling out a handful of large silver coins. I spread them on the low table between us and counted them out. 39 coins, just short of 4 gold. I repeated the process and her eyes narrowed as she deduced the belt pouches were more than they seemed. After I was done, 2 gold coins and stacks of silver coins totaling an additional 10 gold coins were on the table. "Get your tools tomorrow. We can figure out a place where you can ply your craft afterward." I nodded at her with a reassuring smile. "Get some sleep. You look better, but you need to rest." "Too generous," Ignis whispered, but it didn't stop her from gathering the coins. "I will consider this a loan. Give me a month, and I will have your coin returned to you twofold." I heard Ignis leave at first light. I was fairly certain she would return. I walked with Maveth to the healer's residence later in the morning. I wasn't surprised when Maveth brought us to a villa in the wealthiest district. A massive ironwood door dominated the entrance. Maveth knocked, and the door was opened by a youthful elf in formal dress. He nodded. "You return, Goliath. The ambassador has been expecting you and your friend." I looked at Maveth, irritated, as he had not told me the mage was an ambassador. I looked up at the flag over the door, and it was not the flag of Essenham. The flag had a maroon background with an hourglass and sword clutched in the claws of an eagle. I didn't recall the flag from my studies, but there were many kingdoms in the world. Maveth had told me the story of finding Alaro Morlaman. When I passed out, he ran to the Adventurers Guild Hall for help. At the Guild Hall, they sent him to a healer in the city. When Maveth found the healer and explained what happened, the healer said he couldn't do anything for me. But there was an elven mage healer who might. Maveth had gotten lost finding Alara's residence. But when he found the place, he pounded on the door. 2 city guards drew swords on Maveth. But fortunately, Alaro was woken by the disturbance. It had taken Maveth some time to explain what had happened, as he was simultaneously trying to keep my secrets. Alaro, to his credit, agreed to come immediately. The elf servant escorted us up a flight of wooden stairs to a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves. Alaro was sitting in a chair, reading. He closed the book and rose to greet us with a smile. We shook wrists, and the servant excused himself. Alaro was in fine robes, and his hair was pulled back into a braid. "Please sit. I will inspect your ether core shortly." He seemed excited. I admit it took me nearly 2 days to puzzle it out, and I only figured it out after I decided you were being truthful with me. I sat slowly, suddenly on guard. "What did you figure out?" I asked cautiously. "Why you had such a strong emergence with a single apex water essence." His eyes twinkled as he opened his arms, indicating his revelation. "You inscribed a convergent spell form for maximizing essences." He seemed proud of himself. I wasn't sure if his knowing was a good or bad thing. "Yes, you guessed correctly," I affirmed. I wasn't going to go into detail about just how strong the spell form was, though. He clapped his hands happily. "Amazing! You are only the 3rd person I have met in my centuries who has inscribed that spell form. Is that why you became an adventurer? Do you have one of those essence collectors?" he asked in an excited rush of words. I wasn't sure how to respond. My pause made him wave off his questions, thinking that he had overstepped. "It is no matter. Come closer and I will inspect your core and then we can have lunch." This was why we were here, so I rose and went to him. His spell form violated me again, and he hemmed and hawed like he was searching for something. Maveth looked on nervously. "Is there a problem?" I asked after a few minutes. "No. No problem. I was trying to trace out the affinities on your core. Since you have so many, it is good practice. Your ether core has restored itself enough that it shouldn't leak. When I release the constraints I placed on it, you will feel dizzy from the rush." I felt him working inside me. And then there was a euphoric rush. It was as if a part of me was being restored, and I could feel my spell forms once again. I itched to use them. Alaro backed away. "Good. You should limit the amount of aether you push through your affinities for a month or so, but you will be fine. Lunch should be prepared." He led us to a dining room set with formal-looking dishes. Alaro had 2 other servants working for him, 1 elf woman and 1 human, and they helped us sit. I decided to test my access to my dimensional space and thank Alaro at the same time. "Here, this is for you." I placed one of the dark elf red wines I had carried with me from Caelora on the table. It was still coated in a little bit of dust. He took the bottle and his eyes widened as he studied it. Each bottle had an artistic relief on the glass. I reactivated my slow-aging spell form and felt no discomfort or difficulty. "I must say, you are the most interesting person I have met in some time. Consider this sufficient payment for your treatment." That shocked me, as I had been prepared to hand over 100 gold for his fee. He handed the bottle to the servant. "Caelorian wine, if I am not mistaken. I heard rumors that the Tellians had sent an expedition." "You have explored the cursed, haunted ruins, then?" he asked politely. I was surprised, and it briefly showed on my face. I nodded at his question. "You are well connected to have knowledge of Caelora. I didn't recognize the flag above your archway." I left the question hanging. His servant returned with a cup of red wine, which he sniffed and sipped. He had a thoughtful but satisfied expression on his face before responding. "You wouldn't recognize my homeland. Milvanoris fell over 200 years ago on the other continent. The Grand Duchy is famous for taking in refugees if you have a large enough purse," he said considerately. "The Grand Duke graciously still recognizes Milvanoris as a sovereign power, even though my people are scattered to the winds and our cities are buried by the sands. Maveth only nibbled at the food, and asked, "What happened to your nation?" A pained look came over his face as he told his tale. "We were not a large elven nation by any means, less than 100,000 citizens. The human coalition of cities played with magics beyond their control. No rain fell in our lands for 3 years, and he paused, reconsidering his words. I went to treat with them. They refused my overtures to end their meddling with the weather. Most of my people dispersed to find lives elsewhere as our land turned to dust and sand. Our mages tried to reverse the effects, but a weather battle between 100 mages and 1,000 human mages was not a winnable endeavor. Maveth was listening carefully and asked, "You were the king?" Alaro laughed. "No, my father was on the council, and I served at their will like many others. Maybe your people would consider me similar to a prince in my role. I play that part here, helping any of my people who find their way to Gramney and representing a lost kingdom in the local courts." I could tell he was unhappy talking about it, so I steered the conversation away. I was trying something that reminded me of couscous with plenty of herbs. Will I be able to consume any more affinity essences? He considered the question. I suggest you do not try to emerge any new affinities without a mage specialist healer close by. As for your existing affinities, yes, you can consume their affinity essences. I would still let your core rest for a month," he added. 14 affinities. "If I were still a researcher, I would want to study how you managed it with such a small ether core." I felt comfortable with Alaro and asked, "Is being born with 11 affinities rare?" "Extremely, more so considering your core size. Most elven mages have 5 to 7 affinities, but usually only 2 or 3 are strong enough for inscription and spellcraft," he replied with a professorial tone. I nodded thankfully. My development was temporarily stalled, but I could continue in time. I listened as Maveth and Alaro struck up a conversation about Nilvanoris. Stone Mountain Island was off the coast of the other continent, but the desert that was Nilvanoris was still thousands of miles away from Maveth's home island. Later, while we were leaving, Alaro invited us back. "Please visit again. The courts in the Grand Duchy are tedious, and I enjoy conversing with unique individuals." I was unsure if he was referring to Maveth or me. I checked on Ginger before we returned to our suite. Ignis had not returned yet. I informed Maveth that we would be leaving in 2 days for the Bhutan Caliphate. He eagerly left to get supplies for our trip, which seemed like it was going to be by land and not by teleportation. In the common room, I pulled out a number of things from my dimensional space. The 2 lesser runic blades from Boris Men, a lesser runic short sword that Ignis gifted me, 6 elven daggers, and the legionnaire armor Duchess Veronica had made for me. When Ignis returned, she looked excited about her heavy burden. It looked like her expedition had been successful. The old woman was nearly bursting with happiness, but stopped, confused at the items I had placed on the table. "What is all this? I was thinking you could sell this to open your smithy." Her confused look made me ask, "Is it not enough? There are 3 runic weapons here. Not dungeon forged, but good enough to get 100 or more gold." Her eyes drifted to the new, polished legionnaire armor. I could tell she was trying to figure out how I had gotten it here. "Why would you do this?" she asked with healthy skepticism. "I am going to consider it an investment. I will own half of your smithing business. I will come by every few years to collect my profits, and to commission work for myself." I smirked as I saw her eyes begin tearing up. She rubbed her eyes before they released any tears. "Half? That is ridiculous. I will be the one doing all the work." Her negotiation was half-hearted. "What is fair then?" I asked. "I didn't consider anything I had laid out useful." She shook her head, irritated. "Fine. You drive a hard bargain. Half it is, but only of the profits." She walked over to study the items more closely. "Did you even wear it?" She was talking about the armor. "Once, for a few minutes. A duchess had it crafted for me after I did her a service," I replied, and Ignis raised her eyebrow before giving me a lascivious smirk. "Do you know a legionnaire named Matteo? He was just arrested for fighting. I think he was defending the honor of a waitress, but I didn't see the whole incident. He was wearing pieces of common legionnaire armor painted black." "Where?" I asked, my heart racing. If it was Matteo, maybe others made it too. "It was in the trade district. There is a jail along the west wall near there. That is probably where he is being held, Ignis informed me. Are there any others? How is he wearing Legion armor in the city? I asked anxiously, preparing to leave. I wouldn't wait for Mevaith, but Ignis could tell him where I had gone. He just had Legion vambraces and greaves, and they were stained black. I didn't see any others, but I arrived as he was being taken away. Ignis was examining one of the swords. Don't do anything rash, Eric. He assaulted a citizen of the Grand Duchy. Even if he was in the right, he will have to pay a price. I pulled the blood compass to my hand and activated it with Castile's sample inside. The pull was strong, but not close. Maybe 3 miles west or slightly less, by my estimate. I smiled. Castile and Matteo were alive. Maybe the rest of the company was waiting outside the city and Matteo had just gotten into a little trouble. Tell Mevaith where I went. I belted on a regular sword and elven dagger, not wanting to risk my runic weapons if things escalated. My adventurer's medallion was hanging outside my tunic. I learned that if I was going to walk around the city with weapons, it made the guards less suspicious of me. I was not wearing armor because it was not needed. At least, I hoped it would not be needed. The city of Gramney was large, and it was a long walk to the western side from the upper district. As I got closer, I stared off a few pickpockets, their movements much too obvious. The jail was not difficult to find and was fairly massive, nearly 200 feet long, tucked along the western wall. Numerous guards walked outside it and on the wall above the structure. I could see the small windows denoting the cells. I put on a friendly smile when I spoke to one of the guards. One of my friends has recently been incarcerated. Where can I go to see about getting him free? The guard assessed me, judging my appearance. My clothes were decent and should have signaled that I was a man of wealth, though I favored darker colors over the brighter hues that nobility everywhere seemed to prefer. It didn't take him more than a glance to direct me. The Arbiter's office is at the end, he pointed. I thanked him with a large copper. Thanks for your help. Enjoy an ale after your shift. He nodded happily, and I made eye contact to ensure he remembered me. It was always best to let the local guards know you were friendly. As I approached the offices, a familiar voice was talking loudly. I don't understand. The woman said he was protecting her, and the man was still alive, just a few bumps on his head. Why can't we pay damages and be on our way? I peeked into the office to see an exasperated Benito arguing with a man in royal blue robe. The Arbiter seemed to be losing his patience. His case will be handled in the order it was received. You can return tomorrow evening. It should come up by then. I walked in and stood behind Benito, towering over him by a head. I was disappointed there were no other legionnaires here. Benito's clothes were worn, and not Legion issue. As Ignis had said, Benito also had Legionnaire greaves, and vambraces painted a dark, flat black. He didn't smell too great either. What kind of trouble did Matteo get into now? I asked Benito conversationally. Benito looked back for a second. Eric, we were drinking all peaceable-like, and I went to take a piss. When I came back, Matteo had knocked out some grizzled laborer. He swears the Benito's brain finally caught up to what his eyes were seeing, and he slowly turned. Eric! He reached out and touched me to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. He moved in and gave me a half hug. I told them Pluto wouldn't take you. You were just going to pop up somewhere. And here you are. He squeezed me for an awkward amount of time. Good to see you too, Benito. People are going to talk if you don't release me. The Arbiter smirked and Benito stepped back. A pained expression came over his face. Damn it, Eric. Why couldn't you have shown up 2 weeks ago? Castile used my betting pool money for food. You owe me 7 silver. Although he didn't mean it, he sounded offended. I chuckled softly, and he smiled, realizing his own joke a little late. Did everyone make it? I asked more seriously. Benito's expression changed to despair. No, Constantine wasn't with us for the... He looked at the Arbiter battle. He thought for a bit, bringing up the memories. As he did, I moved us outside, out of earshot of the Arbiter. Benito continued. Firth lost his hand. The healing mages hadn't gotten to him to reattach it by the time we rode with the Emperor. Linus as well. He took an arrow to the neck and was mostly healed, but not enough to ride. This was at the battle against the Emperor? I asked. No, before. We crushed the Barteradians between 2 armies. Blood drained from his face at the memory. Bloodiest fight I have ever been part of. We won, but some of the Barteradians fled and the Emperor ordered pursuit. Everyone who was able grabbed a horse. Mine was a big black brute who kept wanting to turn around, like it was scared and knew what it was riding into. We rode up on the Barteradians, dismounted, and the Emperor cast his black lightning. The day was clearly won, and then he paused. I didn't really see what triggered it, but soon we were fighting the Imperial Legion. It was crazy, even though Castile told me it might happen. He shivered. I don't want to think about it. More spells than arrows in the air. His voice got heavy. Adrian, Colm, and Mallory fell in the fight. After a pause, he leaned in conspiratorially. It was Blaze. Blaze put an arrow in the Emperor's eye at 50 paces. After that, the Duke pulled his army away, and Castile ordered us into the woods. It's been weeks crossing Barteradia to get here. The first few days were rough, but after we disguised ourselves as mercenary caravan guards, it was easier. Who is with you now? And where are they? I pressed. They are in a hamlet outside the city to save coin, Benito said. Castile, Blaze, and Lurkin. Wiley was with us but disappeared on the second night. Castile said to let him go. Oh, and Mateo is locked up. He gestured profanely at the Arbiter's office. My heart got heavier with each name he listed. There was a chance Constantine, Linus, and Firth were alive, but the only ones who had made it to Gramney were Castile, Mateo, Blaze, Benito, and Lurkin. Well, at least you had a cook, I said softly, remembering Benito's quip on entering the shimmering labyrinth. Benito took a moment to figure out what I meant. Lurkin is in a bad state. He has an infection in his leg from a knoll spear that he received 5 nights ago. Blaze wrenched his knee and is laid up too. Mateo and I were here to find work to make some coin for healing poultices. Why doesn't Castile use her magic? Surely she could make good coin with it, I asked. Benito was saddened again. She is burnt, Eric. During our first few days in Barteradia, we only traveled at night. She was using her shadows to conceal us from the enemy. That shocked me. Castile always seemed so unassailable. She also knew when she had reached her limit. My best guess was that she knew being caught would be a death sentence. I patted Benito on the back. Okay, let me see if I can grease the wheels of justice for Mateo. Grease the wheels? Are you going to cook for them? Benito said, confused. Just wait here. I returned inside to confront the Arbiter. He exhaled and nodded at 2 guards nearby to be on alert. I stepped close to him and whispered, I have been told there is a special fee to expedite a case review? He motioned the guards back, a good sign. The friend of your acquaintance? He asked politely, seeing my hand covering the gold coin. I nodded. Let me take a look. We do need to clear some cells today. He went to a folder and started paging through it till he found the sheet he was looking for near the back. Looks like a simple tavern fight. He acted like he was considering the case as he readied a stamp. 2 large silver or 14 days on a work detail is the normal fine, he announced loudly so the guards could hear him. But it looks like both parties were equally at fault here. I think 1 large silver or a week laying quarry stone. He will pay the fine, I said, adding a large dungeon silver to the counter with a clink. The Arbiter took the silver, scratched out the verdict and stamped it. I moved my hand away from the gold coin, and the paper covered it. Sign here. Next time he is caught fighting in the city, it will be 40 silver. The gold coin disappeared with the paper. He turned to a guard. Pull the Telian from cell 19. He is free to go. I went outside to bring Benito in, but he had been close enough to see. Since you are giving out coin so freely, do you have the 7 silver you owe me? No, Benito. Getting Mateo out just cost me 110 silver. I am going to stand in the corner to see if Mateo recognizes me. I smirked, anticipating his reaction. It was a good 20 minutes before Mateo was marched out of the long hallway. 2 guards walked behind him as he limped toward us. His right eye was swollen shut, and his lip was crusty with blood. Benito turned to me and said, The city guards did that to him for resisting. I wanted to slap Benito. The guards could clearly hear him, and it was ruining my surprise. Mateo was missing his greaves and vambraces, and it didn't look like he was getting them back. What's the damage? Mateo asked Benito. I found a friend who paid to get you out, Benito said happily. A friend? Did Castile come into town? Mateo said, confused. I was leaning against the wall, and Benito gestured toward me. I should have been more explicit in my instructions to him. Mateo squinted with his one good eye. I was standing in the shadows as there was only a single window in the room. What the? He stepped closer, not believing it. Like Benito, he needed to touch me to confirm. Eric? But you are dead. Castile said. He moved in for a full hug, getting a little choked up. When we separated, I said, "Yeah, it seems to happen a lot. You two can go get the others. Try to avoid getting into any fights on the way. We are at the Crescent Crossroads Inn in the Trade District. 3rd floor suite. Don't tell Castile. I want to surprise her." I looked pointedly at Benito. "Mateo, why don't you do all the talking? Who is with you?" Mateo asked, staring at my adventurer's medallion. "Medivith is with me, and we are headed to the Bhutan Caliphate. But we can talk about that later." Benito's eyes widened. "You're going into orc lands. Why would you do that?" Mateo shook his head at Benito. He said he would explain later. "Let's go get Castile and the others. We are renting a small house far outside the city. It is a half-hour walk, so it will be some time with my leg." We spent a few minutes talking. Their journey getting here was obviously quite the story. As I walked back alone, I couldn't believe Adrian, Colm, and Mallory were dead. Castile had lost 2/3 of the company's legionnaires since I joined. When I entered the suite, Mavis rushed to me. "Is the company in the city?" I nodded. "Where's Ignis?" She took one of the swords to sell. "Where are they?" Mavis rumbled excitedly, looking at the door. "They were staying outside the city. There are only 5 of them, Mavis." Mavis's excitement faded at my words. We waited for an hour before the thunder of multiple people could be heard coming up the steps. There were some whispers in the hallway before a short, sharp knock. Mavis and I rose to greet them. I opened the door to see Castile standing in the hallway, the company men behind her. Castile didn't look healthy and was speechless at seeing me, her jaw trying to work. We stared at each other for a long time before Benito asked, "Are we going in? Do they have any food?" Benito, not waiting for the stunned Castile to move, gently pushed her aside and stepped past her, entering the common room. "Nice place. I don't see any food. Can you order some from the tavern below? The stew smelled good on the way." Benito dropped his pack and sat heavily on the sofa. His pungent scent from being on the road for so long filled the room. Castile finally regained herself and asked, "How are you here? How are you even alive?" "Cornelius told Constantine you were dead." She said the last word with finality. "It's Eric. He is like crotch crickets, always surprising you when you least expect it," Lurkin said from behind Castile. He squeezed past her too. His leg was bandaged, and he walked gingerly. "Drink this, and don't complain about the taste," I said, handing him an orc healing potion as he passed me. Realizing what it was, he patted me on the back affectionately before sitting down with a groan and a sigh. His pack joined Benito's on the floor, along with his sword belt. "Castile, if you are not going to enter, may I?" Mateo asked politely, unlike Benito and Lurkin. Castile numbly moved aside again, still processing my appearance. Mavis was greeting the men and pouring them cups of water. "There is a bath," I announced to those in the room. "You could all use it," I hinted. They smelled of the road and horses. Blaze was the last one behind Castile, but he waited patiently, using the wall for support, his knee in a brace. Castile finally stepped forward into the suite. Blaze entered behind her, and we briefly clapped each other's backs in a brief hug. I handed him a Pathfinder potion as well. Lurkin warned him, "Ugh, Blaze, you might want to keep your limp instead of risking losing your ability to taste." Lurkin was trying to clean his tongue on his shirt and spitting into it. "What foulness are you poisoning us with?" "Pathfinder potions. I killed a few dozen orcs for them. I will remember that you are not interested in consuming them in the future," I said with a roguish grin. Lurkin immediately reconsidered and said, "I am sure they just take getting used to. Either that or eventually, I won't be able to taste anything anyway, and it won't matter." Castile, looking at the men lounging as a beaming Mavaith served them, turned to me. "Can we talk?" "Let me feed the rabble first," I said, smiling. I walked to the low table in the seating area and produced my last 12 burritos, along with 2 canteens filled with elven ambrosia. Benito was already biting into the first one. His mouth full, he said, This makes the walk here worth it. Blaze reached for the canteen to wash the taste of the Pathfinder potion from his mouth. A loud conversation erupted as they ate and drank, and I moved away to talk with Castile in one of the rooms. Castile immediately sat on the bed as I closed the door. Her feet and body were weary. "How did you get here?" I asked her quietly. She exhaled in a long breath. Her tone was heavy. "Me first, then you. Zaina enacted the attack on the Emperor. He should have been spent, but had a reserve of either. It didn't go well, and many were lost. The Empire was crippled by the number of mages killed in the rebellion." I handed her some cold blood orange juice. Her eyes widened as she sipped it, and she licked her lips clean of the sweet, acidic drink. We slunk away after the battle and made our way east. There were fewer of us than planned, but it made it easier to move in stealth. We only traveled at night, but were found by a mounted patrol. I overextended in the fight to make sure none of them escaped, and we took their horses. She winced, and I assumed that was where she had burned her ether channels. That night, Wiley rode back to the Empire, probably to report to Firth. The horses were a blessing. We rode them hard during the night for a week before they failed us, and we abandoned them. A few days later, we abandoned everything that marked us as Legion and served as merchant guards for a small, fast-moving caravan for a week. After that, we made our way to Gramney on foot. We arrived 3 days ago, weary, poor but whole. Castile finished with her very brief summary. She hadn't even mentioned that a gnoll had wounded Lurkin. It was my turn, so I began at the beginning. After hound training, I got a lookout position in Kraken Bay. Other than the loneliness, it was serene and peaceful. The Caliphate fleet sailed down the bay, and I was ordered to shadow them. I eliminated most of my adventures and skipped over capturing the first citizen mage. The Caliphate put ashore a group of Pathfinders, and I noticed Goliaths were moving the cargo. I wasn't going to intervene, but was spotted. I was forced to eliminate the Pathfinders and free the Goliaths. Castile arched her eyebrow at how casually I talked about eliminating a Pathfinder squad. One of the Goliaths had news of Mavavith's sister. The news was 10 years old, but gave me hope she was alive. I followed the largest part of the fleet until they spotted me again. I fled and managed to locate the archives. Castile got excited, but it quickly faded. "You found the archives. I suppose it is too late to return and destroy the samples." I produced Castile's jar in my hand and handed it to her like a prize. "I destroyed the archives, everything in it. I only took this to find you and the company." Castile reached for the inscribed jar, but pulled her hand back before reaching for it again. She turned the jar over, looking at the square pieces of bloody fabric within. She was mesmerized by the tumbling fabric for a time before asking, "The archives at the palace?" "I don't know. There was a fire at the palace when I left. Ignis supplied Imperial Legion armor to infiltrate them." "Maybe she knows more," I said uncertainly. She looked me in the eyes. "How did you get here?" She stressed the question. "After the archives, I found Mavith in Sobril, and we went to the capital from there. We took an Adventurers Guild ship to Esenhem and teleported here from the Elven Kingdom. We have been here about 2 weeks," I said, skipping the details. She didn't need to know about the Knoll migration, First Citizen Boris, or the Sawagan swarm. 2 weeks, she said in disbelief. She almost dropped the jar. She laughed a little hysterically, like I had told a bad joke. "We spent nearly a month getting here. Every day was perilous and could have ended our flight." She shook her head in disbelief, thinking I had taken a boat ride and gotten here relatively unscathed. After she calmed down, I asked, "Benito said you were burnt? How bad is it?" A pained look on her face made me want to comfort her, knowing how debilitating it was. "Twice I burned my channels, once for the Barteradian mounted patrol, and once to hide us from a Cyclops venturing out from a cave from the endless dark. I won't know how bad it is until I can access a tablet reader, though." Oh, you need a tablet reader?" "I have an elven one, but it is so old that it is configured for humans. It was one of the first built by elves, from my understanding." "Do you wish to use it?" She cocked her head at my statement, and I knew I was showing off a little since I didn't need to hold my secrets as tight any longer. She slowly nodded, and I produced the tablet. It barely made a sound as it settled on the floor. Castile stood immediately, marveling at it in amazement. She looked at me, and then back at the tablet in disbelief. Yes, Castile. I really am that big, I said in my head. Castile couldn't read Elvish, but all the attributes and affinities were in the same order. She traced her hands along the tablet, hesitant to activate it. Did you get this from Caelora? She finally asked. There was no reason to deny it. Yes. Are you going to use it? Castile took a deep breath, reluctant to know the bad news, but she activated it anyway. My eyes immediately traveled to her affinities to satisfy my curiosity. Elemental magics, which are common, include fire with a value of 0, air with a value of 26, water with a value of 0, earth with a value of 0, lightning, also known as energy, with a value of 49, spirit, also known as healing, with a value of 0, nature, also known as plant, with a value of 0. Unaffiliated magics, which are uncommon, include charm, also known as mind, with a value of 62, illusion, with a value of 62, clairvoyance, with a value of 46, protection, also known as guardian, with a value of 0, necromancy, with a value of 19, celestial, also known as buff, with a value of 0, abyssal, also known as debuff, with a value of 28. Rare magics include space, with a value of 0, time, with a value of 0, displacement, with a value of 0, materialism, with a value of 0, worlds, with a value of 0, void, with a value of 0, convergence, with a value of 0. Magical attributes include Aether Pool, with a value of 58 out of 60, channeling, with a value of 44 out of 50, Aether Shaping, with a value of 64 out of 68, either tolerance, with a value of 35 out of 37, either resistance, with a value of 27 out of 30. Aether affinities include prime aether affinity, illusion, minor aether affinity, energy. I was underwhelmed by her affinity strength, but she was one of the most effective mages in Empire because she was adept at using what she had. Still, Rena was much more powerful when it came to affinities. Castile interrupted me. Can you read me my magic attributes? I don't know Elvish. My eyes moved across the tablet and I read them to her. When I read out the channeling rating, she nearly collapsed. I stopped reading. How bad is it? I asked, concerned. I lost 3 potential points, she said numbly. I will never recover. She realized that she would be in pain for the rest of her life, every time she used her magic. I wished I could console her, but it would likely take a dozen or more apex channeling essences to restore her channels. They were just too rare. I sat beside her on the bed while she stared blankly ahead. I waved at the tablet. Your magic attributes put mine to shame, Castile. I will try to provide whatever you need to live a comfortable life here before I leave with Mavit. She nodded numbly. A knock came at the door. Mateo had slurred speech as he spoke. Castile, we decided you should use the tub first. If you don't want to, then we are going to draw straws. Castile hesitated before she stood. I am going. After she left, I looked at the tablet. I could give it to her. It would be a very profitable venture for her. I was charged gold to use one in a Telhyan city before I discovered the one in the Adventurers Guild. I cleared Castile's reading, squeezed the tablet, and sent a pulse of aether to activate it. Elemental magics, which are common, include fire with a value of 0, air with a value of 0, water with a value of 4, earth with a value of 42, lightning, also known as energy, with a value of 8, spirit, also known as healing, with a value of 23, nature, also known as plant, with a value of 0. Unaffiliated magics, which are uncommon, include charm, also known as mind, with a value of 5, illusion, with a value of 13, clairvoyance, with a value of 0, protection, also known as guardian, with a value of 30, necromancy, with a value of 0, celestial, also known as buff, with a value of 0, abyssal, also known as debuff, with a value of 0. Rare magics include space, with a value of 101, time, with a value of 90, Displacement, with a value of 80. Materialism, with a value of 9. Worlds, with a value of 88. Void, with a value of 22. Convergence, with a value of 74. Relief flooded me. I had been worried that damage to my ether core might have affected my affinities. Would Castile be envious of my scores? There were some secrets that I was not willing to share. My eyes drifted to my displacement affinity. Worlds and displacement were the only two affinities for which I could inscribe a spell form. Maybe it was time to start focusing on a displacement spell form, even though I lacked the ether to use it effectively. I looked over at my attributes. Physical attributes include Strength, with a value of 67 out of 84. Power, with a value of 62 out of 88. Quickness, with a value of 54 out of 62. Dexterity, with a value of 64 out of 75. Endurance, with a value of 79 out of 98. Constitution, with a value of 61 out of 73. Coordination, with a value of 57 out of 69. Mental attributes include Intellect, with a value of 38 out of 58. Reasoning, with a value of 53 out of 62. Perception, with a value of 57 out of 64. Insight, with a value of 37 out of 52. Resilience, with a value of 56 out of 71. Empathy, with a value of 22 out of 26. Fortitude, with a value of 63 out of 90. Magical attributes include Aether Pool, with a value of 24 out of 26. Channeling, with a value of 39 out of 61. Ether Shaping, with a value of 9 out of 9. Aether Tolerance, with a value of 50 out of 56. Aether Resistance, with a value of 16 out of 19. Aether affinities include Prime Aether Affinity, Space, Minor Aether Affinity, Time. My potentials had not changed significantly due to my limited access to essences. My physical attributes had only seen modest improvement in the past few months. I was fortunate that the essence had prevented me from losing points during periods of laziness or illness, such as when I had needed to heal naturally for 2 weeks. I reset the reader and returned it to my dimensional space. I walked back into the common room to a quartet of drunk legionnaires. No, they were no longer legionnaires, even if they still wore pieces of black-stained armor. "Do you have any more of this?" Lurkin asked, waving the empty canteen in front of him. I produced the black jade chalice from the dungeon, which they were familiar with. I transmuted a quart of water into elven whiskey called ambrosia. Benito snagged the canteen after I filled it from the chalice. Mateo looked me in the eyes. Maveath told us about his sister. "If you can wait, once we get Castile settled, we will go with you," Blaze added. I always wondered what it would be like to be an adventurer, killing monsters, rescuing citizens, always on the road to the next fight. He was grinning madly at the thought of doing the same things he did as a member of the Legion. Benito finished his pull on the canteen and handed it to Lurkin. "But we get paid more, right? Adventurers are rich?" The door opened and Ignis walked in, causing the group to go silent. "You found them. The mage didn't make it?" I pointed at the bathroom and she nodded. Ignis looked at me. "I sold one of the weapons and found a forge on the outskirts of the trade district. The smith is moving to be with his aging parents in the village where he was raised." "How much?" I asked, getting to the point. 800 gold. But I will talk him down to 700 tomorrow and explore getting a loan," Ignis said as she moved to sit with the stunned men. I introduced her, as she wasn't making an effort to do so. "Everyone, this is Ignis, Master Imperial Blacksmith." "Master Armorsmith," Ignis returned coolly. As they introduced themselves, I added 6 loaves of the delectable elven bread to the table. The hungry piranhas made short work of it. I got into a conversation with Ignis. She had gotten 97 gold for the sword, and it was the best of the 3. The non-artifact armor would only fetch 15 gold if sold to a collector, in her estimation, since she was going to be about 500 gold short. I handed her the silver earrings shaped like leaves from the shimmering labyrinth. Maybe they had some artistic value. "Are these valuable?" I asked, placing them in her free hand. The other was occupied by a loaf of the elven bread. Ignis took the earrings and tossed them lightly in her hand. She studied them closely, then looked at me. "You are full of surprises. Where did you get platinum earrings?" "Caelora," I responded, not mentioning that I thought they were silver. I should have realized they were platinum by their weight. Ignis seemed to consider the 2 swords and the earrings, nodding to herself. About 500 gold. I can make it work. You said you needed 7? 20 large gold coins appeared on the table as I placed my hand on it. All eyes looked at the stack and then at me. Mateo's eyes widened at the stack of gold. Oh, mighty Jin, I wish for 1,000 gold coins. He bowed to me and nearly stumbled to the floor. I waved my hands again, and they followed them intently. But all that appeared was a bright red apple that I bit into casually. Caelora remained in the bathroom while we celebrated, and we only checked on her once. She exited shortly after and went into one of the rooms instead of joining us. As everyone moved to find sleeping accommodations, Lurkin came to talk with me. Someone should stay with Caelora. It feels like we are abandoning her here. If it's okay with you and Maveth, I will stay with her. I can find work at an eatery in the city and watch over her. I heard many mages have trouble dealing with the burn. I patted Lurkin on the back. We don't mind at all. Have you ever thought about running your own tavern? I let the men deal with their surprisingly mild hangovers in the morning. I had sampled the ambrosia on a few occasions as a sentry at Kraken Bay. It was a little sweet for my palate, but if you could get it cold, it was better than the best ale. It didn't take much to get buzzed, and I had never experienced a hangover the following day. I would have to remember to refill the pair of canteens from the black chalice since my companions had drained them. Ignis gathered the swords and earrings and prepared to make an offer on the smithy. Caelora looked much better after a long rest, but her face was still filled with uncertainty. Leaving no room for argument, I told her, Caelora, you and I are going to visit a mage healer this morning. He is an elf and specializes in mages. Caelora looked skeptical, but changed into her cleanest clothes and joined me. The rest of the men were going to spend the morning on laundry, and then register at the Adventurers Guild, Maveth eager to show them the sights. Last night I'd offered to come up with funds for Lurkin to purchase a small tavern or inn in the city, and he was going to scout his options. I guessed the cost would be similar to the smithy, so I would need at least another 700 gold. I shouldered a heavy pack I had prepared for visiting Alaro and left with Caelora. As we walked through the city, Casteel's eyes and mind wandered. The myriad of races is what primarily drew her attention. I broke her daze by asking a question. What do you plan to do now that you are free? Free at a cost, she murmured testily. She composed herself. I can still channel ether. It is difficult to focus on casting true spells through the pain, but the spell forms on my core are more manageable. I will find solace as a tutor of magic, or perhaps as a bodyguard. She spoke of the latter profession with derision. Her ability to unweave ether to prevent others from casting spells was one of the spell forms she had inscribed on her core. I assumed that was why she was considering being a bodyguard. Maybe she had planned for the others to join her in the enterprise. Why not the Adventurers Guild? I inquired. In a tired voice, Caelora responded. I am spent, not just from being burnt. As a woman mage commander, I could not have a family until after my service was completed. Maybe now. Her voice faded. We walked for a while before she spoke again. Her throat was a little tight. Adrian and I, he always said after we had both escaped the Legion. That was shocking news, as I had never seen them be affectionate with each other. Caelora chuckled, seeing my bewilderment. Not with Adrian. We just planned to start families after the Legion. He was always more of a paternal protector than a lover. I nodded, but didn't want to discuss our dead comrades. We had reached Alaros Villa, and I spent a moment explaining the flag and the nation of Milvanoris before we knocked. It wasn't long before we were seated in his study. Caelora marveled at the private library. I see you have brought a lovely friend with you. Are you experiencing more symptoms, or is this a social visit? My recovery is going well, I said, as Casteel's questioning look shifted from me to the elf. We are not here for me today, but for my friend here. Caelora has burned her ether channels, and I was hoping you knew of a remedy. The elven noble reclined, and his lips tightened. Ether burn. There is only one cure. Apex channeling essences. Caelora tensed as hope fled her. If she doesn't want to use her ether, I can shield her core as I did for you. It will remove her ability to cast spells, but she will no longer feel any pain. It is a fragile containment, and attempting to use any ether will shatter it. That is not an option, Castile hissed moodily. Alaro shrugged. The old elf looked sympathetic, but not invested in Castile's decision. The only other thing I can offer is a draft that will numb your pain some. I don't suggest it, since it is addictive and also numbs your other senses as well. But if you are having trouble sleeping, it can give immense relief. Thank you for your time, Castile said, ready to leave. You are not alone, Alaro consoled Castile. I have seen dozens of mages in my time with burnt channels. If it is recent, know that you will adapt in time. The body is amazingly resilient, and you can overcome the pain with some mental training to push aside the effects and form spell forms normally. I had only lost 1 point of potential and had managed to acclimate to the burn, but I didn't mention it. I didn't want to reveal that my aether burn was cured. Can you teach her? I asked for Castile, who wore a mask of despair. Alaro exhaled slowly. While I have knowledge of techniques, I am not a teacher. Ignoring his hesitance, I pulled a bottle of elven red wine from my pack and placed it on the table to my right. How many lessons would this procure? I had planned to use the wine as payment for a cure, but since no cure was available, the lessons would do. Alaro licked his lips instinctively, and I could tell he had enjoyed the last bottle, weakening his negotiating position. For you, my friend, 3 dozen. Excellent, I said, smirking as I added 5 more bottles, one at a time, from the pack. That is 216 lessons. Is that enough to learn the techniques? Alaro laughed at my bravado. Castile quickly figured out where the bottles had come from by the dust coating them. I figured I could instruct her successfully in 30 lessons, which is why I offered 36. He gestured at the bottles. Do you even know the value of what you have dancing on the edge of the table? I suppose this is where you tell me I overpaid, I said, laughing softly but not really concerned. Quite so, Alaro said, smiling. He rose from his oversized reading chair and walked to the small table, starting to clean the dust off the bottles. Each bottle is worth a few dozen gold on its own for the artwork, and the preservation runes woven into the glass. He worked through the bottles as he talked. The Caelorian elves were master craftsmen, and the artwork reflects the wine's deeper meaning, not that I can discern it without some research. The wine itself. He paused, considering. I couldn't place a value on it. To a drunkard, a silver. To a human king or wealthy merchant, for the prestige of drinking wine over 1,000 years old, maybe 100 gold. A few fold of that to the right elf who can truly appreciate it and afford it. Castile was looking on, somewhat numb to the sums being mentioned. I could see her thinking and read her thoughts. We had left behind thousands of these bottles in Caelora. What would you pay for a bottle? I asked. Alaro sighed. While I am not destitute by any means, I do not have extensive funds. My income is minimal, and as I informed you on your last visit, I frequently assist refugees from my defunct kingdom. It didn't take me long to make an offer. Are there those in Gramney that could pay the price? Would you be willing to serve as a broker for 4 bottles and keep the 5th as your fee? The 6th bottle was for Castile's lessons. I added quickly, of course, leaving the true origin of the wine out of the equation. Alaro's eyebrows danced in amused thought. Perhaps the ambassador from Esenham for one would pay. He started to nod. I agree to your offer. We shook wrists on it. You can give the gold to Castile, I said, stepping back after we shook. Alaro seemed eager to peddle the wine, and I assumed it was a way for him to gain some prestige in the court. As we were walking back, Castile said, You didn't have to do that. I didn't know which part she was referring to, the lessons or selling the wine. I shrugged as we walked. It's fine. I still have 50 bottles in my space. I will leave a dozen more with you. I didn't notice that she had stopped walking for a few steps. I walked back and collected her. Lurkin is staying behind to watch over you, Castile. He is looking to purchase a tavern or inn. You can facilitate its purchase with the coin Alaro gets for you. What else are you hiding in your space? She said, trying to hide a smile at my loyalty and generosity. I may not have been able to solve her either burn, but she was being put in a comfortable position. I didn't want to give her false hope, but Mavath's homeland was supposedly flush with manticores, and those creatures had yielded channeling essences for me. I had no idea if I could gather the amount required to heal Castile, or if my path would even take me there, so I didn't mention it. I handed her a hot meat bun, which she juggled for a moment before biting into it. Even though no one was near us, I sent an earth pulse out to confirm we were alone and to reveal anyone invisible. Satisfied, I continued talking. I have collected quite a few odds and ends. One of them I was hoping for your help with. This is good, she said, about the meat bun. What do you need help with? Her mood had changed drastically since she had gained some hope for the future. I wasn't sure about revealing the full power of my dimensional space to Castile, but she could keep my secrets. She already knew I was an otherworlder, a first citizen mage, I said as we walked. She thought about it for a moment. It shouldn't be hard to dispose of the body. Just bury it in the woods. Why do you need my help? The problem is she is still alive. I just don't want Benito and the others to know. I'm not sure if they can keep it a secret. Castile had stopped walking again, the meat bun hovering in front of her mouth. I had to walk back and collect her again. Since she was paralyzed, I continued talking normally. Her name is Celine Greco. I was tasked with killing her by Centurion Sergius when I was a hound. I don't think she will be happy or cooperative when I bring her out. I waited for Castile to process this. The street was fairly empty, but I sent out another earth pulse to ease my paranoia. It would be best to move the conversation inside. I ushered her into a small tavern and got a private booth. It was still early morning, and the place only had one other customer. I ordered drinks and food for us and waited for Castile's disbelief to catch up with the conversation. She eventually spoke. You have a mage in your dimensional pocket alive? Yes. She is bound, poisoned, and sedated, so she can't use her magic, but yes, I do. Some crispy fried bread was placed in front of us. It was a bit too greasy, but I took a bite, and it reminded me of garlic bread. Castile was slowly processing the implications. Then I nodded before she finished. And when, I nodded again. Why did you stay in the Legion? I shrugged, keeping my voice low. I am just an ignorant otherworlder, Castile. If I thought I could have run, I would have. Constantine kept telling me it was a death sentence, and I believed him. Now, what are we going to do about the mage? I didn't want to discuss my dimensional space further, which she understood by my tone. Castile ate numbly for a time, before returning to the topic of the mage. The Grecos. I heard something about the orcs killing Baron Greco, Castile said. They had a daughter, but I don't know if I ever met her. My company cleared one of their deep silver mine shafts of kobolds 4 or 5 years ago. The Baron was a reasonable first citizen for the power he wielded, and even entertained the company for 2 days at his estate to thank us. Duke Octavian and Centurion Sergius had them killed to get their silver and gold mines. You have something in common. You both hate Duke Octavian. Castile was staring at me like she didn't know me. I just sipped on my sour ale and waited for her to catch up. If you can then, did you kill creatures with it? It is also how Maveth and I survived the dungeon, but we had to bloody our weapons many times as well. Yes, he knows. It sounded like I was boasting, so I felt the need to add my failure too. The summoner was too strong and resisted, so I had to kill him the hard way. I killed his ice drake that way. It felt good getting the secret off my chest. I could see Castile had an avalanche of questions. I tried to answer them as quickly as I could. I wasn't surprised when she asked if I had kept any food from the company in the ruins of Caelora. I admitted I had the summoner's apprentice pack, and that there had been a few days of food in it, but I hadn't known about it until after I entered the dungeon. Castile slowly acclimated to the new reality of what a monster I truly was. Her disposition had changed greatly in the last few hours. I will take care of your mage problem, she affirmed after I answered her bevy of questions. Great. I will leave her with you when we leave. She has a pack of gold and silver trinkets that should placate her when she finds herself alive and gets them back. Her ring and amulet were given to Centurion Sergius if she asks about them. I had taken the ether shield amulet from Corvus, but I was not returning it. He considered it a transportation fee. Another thought occurred to me. Her 2 legionnaires may come looking for her, Helena and Sylph. I gave them a clue she might be here, but I don't know if they will puzzle it out. I let Castile finish her meal, as she needed the calories. Are you ready to return to the others? I asked. Castile still looked at me like she didn't know me, but at least the initial shock had worn off. When we got back to the suite, it smelled foul. The men had laid out all the gear in their packs and were repacking with new gear and rations they had purchased at the Adventurers Guild. Drying clothes hung from cordage strung across the room, adding to the unpleasant odor. Guild medallions hung proudly from their necks as they worked. "Look, Eric! Benito held up his token!" They let me join. Mateo thought they might not because there was a height requirement. But there were 3 dwarves in the common room there, so I knew I was tall enough. Mateo hid his amused snicker. Maveth's deep voice cut through everyone's conversations. "We got everything we need. Do you want us to get horses as well? I don't know how to ride." I considered the question. There were large mounts for someone of Maveth's bulk, but I was uncertain of the cost and availability. "I will check with the portal office this afternoon. If there are no scheduled portals to Arteria, we will get everyone a mount," I announced. It appeared I was going to be in charge of our little band, or at least I was going to be the one paying our way. Ignis returned a short time later. She had liquidated the platinum earrings and runic weapons. She had a tentative agreement for the smithy she wanted in place. I thought about waiting for her to craft everyone armor, but I knew Maveth had waited long enough. He had been patient, but I could see the delay weighing on him. Everyone had piecemeal leather armor to go with their black legionnaire greaves and vambraces. It made us look like proper mercenary adventurers. It looked like they still had their runic weapons from Caelora, but they had wrapped their hilts to hide their true natures. When Lurkin returned, I took the opportunity to leave and check the portal office. I left some silver for them to get food from the tavern below. Maveth joined me as I left the inn. "We are leaving soon?" he asked as we walked, handing me a pouch. I took the pouch and checked it, curious. It contained several gold coins. "Your half of the payment for delivering the message from Sanko to the guildmaster here. You can keep it." I handed it back to him. There were about 20 gold in the pouch. "We will leave as soon as we can. We still need to find an orc guide, but we can do that tomorrow. If we can't find one here, we can get one in the Caliphate." Maveth talked as we walked, telling me about his morning and their time in the guild hall. Maveth had paid for the others to register, and there had been no issues other than a few people recognizing their accents as Telhian. He got the impression that Telhians were not well liked. When we reached the portal office, Fortuna was smiling on us. A tentative portal to Arteria was scheduled for 4 days later. The cost was 5 gold per person and 10 gold for a horse. We were definitely not getting any mounts, and it was time for Ginger to get used to my dimensional space. Maveth was confused when I only paid for passage for 6 people. "Is Ginger staying with Castile? Who is the 6th person?" he asked as we walked back to the inn. I cleared some space for Ginger. "The 6th person is the orc guide if we find one. I didn't want to risk the portal getting sold out," I explained. The number of people was limited for each teleport, but we had gotten lucky, as the portal registry had recently opened. There was a chance the portal would not occur if the elven displacement mage didn't arrive, though. "Ginga will fit. Will I fit too?" Maveth asked, more as speculation than practicality. "Maybe one day we will find out," I said, laughing menacingly. "You will not cage me, foul mage," Maveth said in mock worry, moving to the other side of the road in jest. When we returned to the suite, Lurkin and Castile took me aside. Lurkin seemed eager to talk about his options in the city. "I found a few places. Some I thought were out of reach." He looked at Castile, who nodded. "One is nestled between the Trade District and the Riverdock District. An older proprietor has a lovely little inn that hasn't seen much business since the new docks were built further upriver, with 2 new luxury inns opening there. He wants to retire with his wife and move away from the city." "How much?" I asked. Lurkin looked to Castile again for support before saying, 1,200 gold, but the furnishings for the 18 rooms will be included, as well as a fully stocked kitchen." His voice had changed to hopeful. He showed me his books. They do about 300 gold in business annually, but it used to be closer to 400. I looked to Castile and back to Lurkin. "And one of the rooms will be for Castile?" "There is actually a small house attached to the stables in the back courtyard," Lurkin said eagerly. "It has 3 additional bedrooms, and that is fine with you?" I asked Castile. Castile laughed softly, a sign she was adjusting. "I slept on the ground among filthy men most nights these last 20 years. A private room with a bed is a luxury." You can handle Alaro's brokering the sale of the wine then, I said, as I made the 12 promised bottles appear on the table. As far as I was concerned, the company men were entitled to the bottles as a share of the loot. I was just doing my job as the company porter. It was also some penance for not revealing my capabilities to the company. Lurkin huffed. You had some left, huh? Didn't think I would see another bottle in my lifetime. Maybe we have a chance to enjoy it now. Castile started cleaning the bottles and had other ideas. These bottles are your inn, Lurkin. Castile turned to me. Ignis said you own half of her smithy. Are you doing the same for Lurkin's inn? Why don't you and Lurkin split ownership? I replied indifferently. The truth was, it was very doubtful I would ever return to Gramney in their lifetimes. Even if we failed to find Zarana, I had still promised to travel with Myvith to confront his father. Stone Mountain Island was on the other side of the world. I don't think that is equitable, Castile rebuked me with a shake of her head, and Lurkin nodded in agreement. A three-way split for ownership? She offered. Lurkin was already nodding, so I guess they had planned this. Mateo was moving across the room, his eyes locked on the bottles of Caelorian wine, not having heard our conversation. Castile barked in her command voice for everyone to hear. Mateo, those bottles are worth more than the Primus sword you carry. That caused him to pause and look down at the weapon on his hip in confusion. Primus Scorpio? I asked, slightly confused. Mateo grinned. Yeah, he didn't need it anymore. I held out my hand and he drew the blade, handing it to me. He had disguised the hilt, but the silvery metal along the blade and the runes clearly marked it as dungeon forged. I tested the blade with a few swings, sensing a power in it. Unfortunately for Mateo, that power needed to be unlocked. I could feel the sword thirsting for my ether like the Magebane. It is a fine weapon, Mateo. I handed it back to him. Be careful where you draw it. We have had a lot of practice hiding the nature of our weapons over the last few months. I have Delmar's dungeon blade, but it is yours if you wish to carry it, Lurkin said as he retrieved his sheathed weapon from his room. No need, I stopped him. I am well equipped. I fingered Orc's torment on my hip. I would have to switch it for a different blade before we entered the Caliphate. Maybe even before I interviewed the Orc guides. We have a portal to Arteria, Esenhem's capital, in 4 days. It should save us a lot of walking. Benito's eyes went wide with excitement. But it was Mateo who asked a question. I always wondered if there were brothels in the Elven Kingdom. Castile gave him a sharp, disapproving look. Not that I would partake, but I just heard that elves know things. Never mind. I will shut up now. Benito looked confused, and I doubted Mateo would restrain himself if there were brothels in Arteria. It would be fine, as long as he didn't get himself into too much trouble. I moved to sit with Blaze, who I hadn't talked to for some time. He was inspecting some new arrows he had purchased and was regling some fletchings. Why did you decide to join Castile? I asked him privately. He put down the arrow he was working on. It just felt right. Every time I draw my bow and release, I get a feeling that my aim is right. I got that feeling with Castile. Then why are you not staying with her here? I questioned further. Same reason. It just feels like the right direction for me. It is a noble act to help Maveth and his sister. Maybe I was always destined to be an adventurer and defend those who couldn't defend themselves with my bow. Blaze spoke plainly, but there was something deeper in his words. Did Castile tell you that you use aether when you release an arrow? She mentioned it. But I have never been able to feel the aether, no matter how hard I try, Blaze said, smirking. My aether shaping is just 5. I will never be a mage. I opened my hand to reveal the pink hair ring. Elven hunters chased elk around the workings. This artifact will help you with your bow. I placed it in his hand and he inspected it. It needs to be worn in the hair. If you don't like the color, you can paint it. Blaze's hair had grown some, but it would be a challenge to wear the ring at the moment. Thank you. How does it work? He asked, turning the pretty hair clip over. Figure it out with Castile. Once your hair lengthens, it should hold it comfortably. Next, I pulled out my hound poison kit and showed him how to treat his arrows. I then gifted him the poison kit, including the lesser thermal stone. He would need to channel aether if he wanted to use it. So hopefully it would motivate him. Ignis returned, beaming as she announced to the room. I am now the proud owner of the smallest blacksmith forge in the city. We all clapped and would shortly use the news as an excuse to drink. We leave in 4 days. Can you get this sorry lot fitted and suited? I asked, grinning at her. She surveyed the eager expressions, each wearing mismatched armor they had collected during their difficult journey. A few sported pieces of armor they had recently bought at the Adventurers' Hall. We looked like true vagabond mercenaries. I might be able to make you look decent, but as for new armor, I have no jigs, stamps, or stencils prepared. It would be from scratch, and maybe I could get one of you properly suited. All eyes turned to me. It appeared I was the one making the decisions from here on out, the burden of leadership. Do your best with Maveth, Mateo, Blaze, and Benito. You can sell this for supplies. I tossed her a ring. She caught the gold ring and inspected it. The Angela crest? First Citizen Boris Angela's ring. He no longer has use of it, I said snarkily. Boris was trying to loot Caelora. Maveth and I ran into his exploration party on the old road. A wyvern had killed most, and the rest were limping back to Tella. Castile snapped. The first citizen pixie prick deserved his fate. It doesn't leave this room, though. The Empire may be 1,000 miles away, but its ears are not. If Boris' mother lives, she will seek vengeance. Everyone nodded in understanding. I doubted Duchess Veronica cared about her brother's death, but Castile had spent more time with the family and knew them much better than I did. We had food sent up and started feasting and drinking late into the night. My thoughts turned to Ginger, and I left the group to feed her an apple. She was happy to see me and nudged me for a second right after. Ginger, an opportunity has come up. Lurkin is buying an inn in this city. You could stay here with him and Castile, or you can come with me. If you come with me, strange things will happen, and it will be dangerous. Do you want to stay here in safety, or come with me? I thought it was my serious tone, but Ginger seemed to be listening intently. She cocked her head to the side and nudged me in the chest. I produced an apple, and she didn't take it right away, nudging me again, and then she chomped on the apple. I was going to take that as yes. I will come. I sent out an earth pulse to make sure no one was close, and then Ginger disappeared. This spooked some of the horses, and the stable boy came running. I explained that I had traded Ginger away. Over the next 3 days, I helped Lurkin and Castile purchase the inn, signing papers and negotiating with the current owners. The others helped Ignis set up her smithy. Every night they came back filthy from cleaning and doing repairs. Ignis balanced her efforts between equipping them and getting her smithy ready. She removed the stones from the ring and melted the metal down before selling it, heeding Castile's warning. Even though they were tired from the hard days, I had us all start training together in the small courtyard behind the Crescent Crossroads before the evening meal. They complained tenfold the amount they used to when Delmar or Adrian had enforced their training. But they were seasoned men and knew the value of it. For all their whining, they worked hard to win the prize of being the first to use the bath that night. He always won. I used the Dreamscape amulet at night to sort out their weaknesses and prepare for the next day's session. The tavern Lurkin had selected was old but well-maintained. It had a small basement larder with no connection to the city's sewers, which, after Masha, we all agreed was a good thing. However, it didn't have running water like the Crescent Crossroads, so he would have to hire staff to haul it from the city's aqueduct. Elaro was doing his best with the wine, but the process of selling such luxury items took time, which included everything from verifying the authenticity to negotiating a price. The first 2 bottles he sold were to the Ezenhem ambassador for roughly 300 gold each. The aged ambassador was able to decipher the meaning of the relief art and took the 2 most valuable bottles out of the 4. The other bottles were sold to an ambassador from Cassinia and a merchant prince from Linshinia for just over 200 gold each. The 900 gold started the transfer of the inn. There was a balance due of 290 gold at the closing in the city deeds hall. Lurkin sold an elven runic dagger from Caelora, and Castile something of her own. Annoyingly, they had me sign the ownership documents as well. It was still going to be a few days before the current innkeeper and his aged wife could move out, but the structure and all the headaches that came with it were now Lurkin's. Castile had the 12 bottles of wine to sell in an emergency. She didn't think revealing more to Elaro at this time was prudent. The search for an orc guide did not go well. The orc caravan guard, Bragaran Ega, had returned but was not interested in joining us. He made good coin doing 2 trade loops with a local merchant. The next candidate, Sinwraith Glimmerborn, was actually a criminal in the Caliphate, and laughed at me when I asked him to join us. He said he would be strung up by the testicles if the warlord he stole from caught him, and he was being literal, not figurative. The last potential guide was Fulmar Crimsonhand. Fulmar was large for an orc, and had tattoos that marked him as one of their elite warriors. I was not familiar enough with orc society to know if he had belonged to either faction. He was haughty beyond compare, looking down on me and demanding half of all the coin we made. By his tone, I also guessed he assumed he was the one who would make the decisions. With this failure, I decided to try again in Arteria, but was worried about the local guildmaster interfering, since he did not like Extelian legionnaires. I managed to get some time in Ilara's library. All the books were in Elvish and from the fallen empire of Milvanoris. Although the Elvish writing was consistent, the calligraphy was slightly different, making it harder to read. He let me page through all his volumes on spell forms. He lacked volumes on materialism and worlds, but had tomes on all the other affinities. He thought I was just searching for something to imprint, and was not aware of the Dreamscape amulet. On a night in the Dreamscape, I took the time to try to figure out my night vision spell form from the illusion affinity. I had imprinted it during the fight with the gnolls, but it was imperfect, with limited range and mostly shades of gray. I quickly found the reason why that was. I had not imprinted night vision, but something similar to a spell form called Mage Sight. Mage Sight allowed a mage to see aether clearly, and to differentiate objects by their aether density. It was extremely valuable to mages learning how to write out spell forms in the air, or see the framework of other casters' spells. My spell form was just a weaker version of Mage Sight called Aether Sight. If I had imprinted night vision using the spell form within the books, my vision would have had color and significantly greater range. If I had imprinted Mage Sight, I would have been able to see ether and its flows clearly. There were some benefits to either sight, namely that it did not require your eyes to see. If my eyes were removed, or I was blinded, either sight would still give me the ability to see. I could also increase the distance I could see with a higher affinity, but I would never be able to see color. Unfortunately, there was less clarity in seeing with aether than with true mage sight. I counted it a blessing anyway, no matter the limitations. It had been a great few days of working, eating, drinking, and joking with everyone again. Castile's sternness had started to slip as she started to get accustomed to her new life. We all moved to Lurkin's Inn. Although the old innkeeper was still in the house by his stables, the inn was temporarily empty of patrons. I was in the largest room on the 3rd floor with Castile, dawn just getting ready to show itself. The teleport to Arteria was at high noon. The others had already suited up and said their goodbyes. Castile looked me over. I was wearing my black manticore cloak, earth drake boots, and bracers. My adventurer's armor had been cleaned, repaired, and properly fitted by Ignis, even though she noted that she despised working with leather and inferior armor. "Are you going to leave her on the bed?" Castile asked to break the silence. Yes, but I was thinking of what else I could do to help Castile. I had been seriously considering leaving the Elven tablet reader for her. She could have run a very profitable business with it, but it was worth thousands of gold and might make her a target. I didn't have many books left in my space, but they should be easy to sell and wouldn't draw much attention. All of them had been copied into the amulet anyway. A stack of 25 books appeared on the table, 1 or 2 at a time. "You can sell these and give this one to Ignis." She shook her head in wonderment at the assortment. I didn't have the heart to tell her about the stash in the Chancellor's suite at the Telian Mage College. Over 500 books were hidden there. I only had 7 books remaining in my space now. 2 Caelorian herbalism books, a spellbook reward from the Shimmering Labyrinth, an Elven spell form book for the energy affinity, and the 3-volume set for the displacement affinity. "I have copies in the amulet," I explained, then went silent. Castile looked hard at me. "Well, this doesn't have to be an awkward farewell. Somehow, I expect to see you again. You always turn up eventually. I hope you find Mavetha's sister." I nodded, moved to the bed, and deposited the heavy pack of trinkets and coins Celine had fled with. "If she asks where the rest of it is, tell her I gave it to her legionnaires." Maj Selena Greco appeared on the bed. The clean room suddenly filled with pungent odors, including urine and body odor. Castile inhaled sharply, showing her shock at seeing the body and the mage's chest slowly rising and falling. She moved to the woman. She was bound tightly and had a bandage on her leg from where I cut her with the magebane. I had told Castile about the poison and the oblivion pills I had force-fed her. I had treated her fairly roughly, and it would be best if I was gone when she regained consciousness. "Fortuna watch over you," I said softly to her back and left the room. Castile muttered to herself, "Like she has time to take her eyes off of you." The others were all dressed up and wore mostly matching armor when I joined them outside on the street. Ignis had even made Medvedev's armor mostly match the style of the others. We looked more like a proper fighting force, except that Benito was blowing snot rockets. Blaze was leaning against a building trying to get a few more winks, and Mateo's eyes were wandering to every woman walking the streets. I gathered my company and headed to the courtyard for the teleport, while Maveth explained to the others how it worked. On arrival, the golden-haired elven displacement mage noticed me immediately. My group tensed as she approached with a grin on her face. "How was your stay in Gramney?" "It was fine," I replied cautiously. "You know, there was a very disheartened young elf in Arteria who was upset when you and the Goliath didn't come and seek her out," the mage said slyly. "I hate to ruin a surprise, but she may be waiting for you when we arrive." The mage retreated, and her guards encircled her while she recovered, leaving me stunned. "What elf?" Mateo was instantly at my side, staring at the beautiful elven mage walking away. "Eric, you sure get around. How are elves?" "I wouldn't know," I said numbly, dismissing Mateo's assumptions. "I was more concerned about the elf waiting in Arteria." Shit. There was only one elf that knew me and Mavadith. How could she be in Arteria? Why wasn't she in Bartaradia? I looked at my currently happy companions, wondering how I would explain this. Constantine's journey to the capital took a grueling 2 weeks on foot, steering clear of the main roads teeming with soldiers and legionnaires. With the death of the emperor, it was surprising that the Esenham elves hadn't made a move toward the capital or the Atlantium ruins to the south. Constantine speculated that their ultimate goal would be the Atlantium ruins, but their recent losses had made them exercise caution. Under the cover of night, he carefully concealed his armor and weapons amidst the dense foliage of the woods before assuming the guise of a rugged woodsman. Venturing into small farming towns, he sought out whispers and rumors, only to find a bewildering lack of consensus among the townsfolk. One claimed that the orcs had triumphed in the Western Empire, while another vehemently argued that the Legion had successfully repelled the orc fleet, sinking their ships at sea. The disagreement was a bitter reminder of his lost connection to the Empire's information network. Constantine could only listen impassively, wary of being recognized when he ventured into the bustling inns of larger towns. He was glad to finally be at the capital's gates, and it looked like news of the Emperor's death had arrived before him. Constantine entered Telha in beggar clothes, white chalk aging his facial hair and a brace on his foot, giving him a believable limp. Loose, tattered clothes covered his muscular frame. The fresh-faced guards searched him roughly, taking his purse of coppers but letting him pass. That minor theft alone told him things had deteriorated. Moving into the city, he felt a lot of tension in the city streets, and people were hyper-alert as they moved. Constantine paused at a street vendor and paid 3 times what the skewered meat should have cost. The vendor even gave him the gristly portion, thinking him a crippled beggar. Constantine walked past the Eastern Legion Hall, surprised to find the gates locked and no movement inside the compound. That was a shock in itself. Never had the hall been closed in his memory, and he could only surmise there were no legionnaires available to be quartered there. He slowly made his way to a dimly lit alley nearby, settling in among the discarded debris that should have long ago been cleared away and hauled far outside the city to a refuse pit. As he waited for the cover of night, he took brief, restless naps, swatting away bold rats that ventured too close. With the ethereal glow of Neptune's tear illuminating the night sky, Constantine stealthily scaled the wall of the Eastern Legion Hall, landing softly in the courtyard. The city housed 2 other Legion halls, the Imperial Legion Hall within the palace, and the Western Legion Hall, which trained men who volunteered to serve in the Legion. However, the hall he entered tonight was designated for conscripted legionnaires, a somber reminder of his own involuntary service. The hall was completely quiet as he searched the extensive structure in the dark, confirming it was empty. He found the armory and equipment rooms locked and bolted. It took him a few attempts with his spell form to open the lock. He stepped inside and saw the room looked ransacked, most of the equipment and weapons gone. After closing the door, he used a glowstone to pick through the remnants and get proper clothes and weapons. He had hated burying his precious sword outside the city, but knew a runic weapon would have given him away. "What do you think you are doing, old man?" A voice cut through the air behind him. Constantine whirled and crouched, cursing his failure at stealth. A portly woman stood in the doorway. She had not only opened it without him noticing, but had also entered the room. "A testy," Constantine replied. "You are older than me, Gilda." The woman was Antonia's master poisoner, and despite her bulk, was quieter than a cat on the prowl. She had been working in the kitchens when he had last seen her. "Some of us age better than others," she shrugged. He moved the glowstone to get a better view of her. She had dried blood on her cook's apron, and looked pretty haggard. He studied her expression as he spoke, ready to react to any provocation. "Duke Octavian betrayed us. Sergius and the Western Hounds have allied with him, and have probably killed all of Cornelius' loyal hounds." She nodded slowly, her eyes heavy with lack of sleep and her voice flat, without emotion. "I thought as much. Antonia is dead. Her headless corpse resides in her villa. 2 weeks past. Sergius took Cornelius' head as well. A necromancer will ferret out all their secrets in a short time. Why are you still here, then?" Constantine pretended to relax, but shifted his position to gain easier access to a spear leaning against the wall. If Gilda had sided with Octavian, he wanted to be ready. Gilda moved into the room and shut the door behind her, which sent alarms through Constantine, as there was no other exit. "I took care of the 2 imperial necromancers." She sat heavily on a bench, a clear slash opening up on her apron, showing naked flesh. It was her blood that had stained it, but the wound was now healed. Testily, she said, "I did my part in this dragon shitstorm of a plan. 2 dukes, a high mage, and 5 barons are dead. The strongest opponents to Octavian's bid to take the throne are gone." She exhaled. "For all my work, what did it get me? Knifed when I went to report my success to Antonia." Constantine allowed himself to truly relax. He had always admired Gilda's unwavering commitment to honesty, even if it was always a carefully curated version of the truth. "Then why are you still here?" "It has been 2 weeks, he asked, genuinely curious about her continued presence. "The same as you, I assume. I seek revenge. It's not just the necromancers I've been targeting these past 2 weeks. I'll do whatever it takes to frustrate that goblin fucking bastard." Gilda's smile took on a distinctly malicious edge, a stark contrast to her typically grandmotherly demeanor. This woman always made Constantine uncomfortable. Not only was she a master poisoner, but he knew she had spell forms that allowed her to move relatively unseen and unheard. He had not pieced out what spell forms, but knew they existed. Even Cornelius had been wary of this woman. How Antonia had tamed her was a mystery he was likely never to unravel. Still, there was a chance for some information. "The palace archives?" Constantine asked. "The blood samples were kept there, under the palace." Gilda shrugged. "There was a fire, so they are partially or completely destroyed. I don't know or care. I was never part of the archives. The 3 agents sent in never came out after the fire." Constantine winced internally at that. He had helped train those 3 young men, Omar, Albertus, and Pelion. They were all intentionally failed out of hound training many years ago to seek refuge in Antonia's service as planned. He began questioning why he was even here. If Antonia was dead, he should just run, but they would find out he was still alive after the hound he had been paired with did not report in. He began packing a small bag in earnest. "What are you planning, old man?" He weighed telling her the truth. If he approached this the right way, he might recruit her much-needed aid. "The archives. I want to make sure there is nothing left. You want to gain entrance to the palace," she'd scat him. "Foolish man. Prune the branches like me if you want vengeance for the betrayal. A tree cannot grow if all the leaves are gone. I don't want vengeance. I want my freedom." Damn, that was probably the wrong way to appeal to her. Gilda didn't say anything as Constantine dug through the chaotic piles for supplies. How's he going to get into the palace? It was unfamiliar terrain to him. He really wished he had his runic weapon instead of the steel gladius he now wore. But he would make do. Maybe he could liberate an upgrade. The Imperial Legionnaires had many fine runic blades among their number. You will never get in without someone competent holding your hand, Gilda finally said flatly, and Constantine smiled to himself. I will manage unless you know someone dependable. He shouldered his pack, ignoring her, and took a step toward the door. Gilda stood and blocked him, and he waited for the inevitable. The palace holds someone important to me, she said with some false sincerity. He could tell she was looking for a reason to join him. At that moment he gained a deeper understanding of the woman before him. She seemed to crave purpose, yearning to be guided and utilized like a tool. Had Antonia recognized this need and harnessed it? It was as if she was a weapon seeking a master. He had encountered soldiers and legionnaires with similar traits. The problem lay in their tendency to act without empathy, a good trait for a poisoner, but not for someone you needed to rely on in a fight. Who do you need in the palace? Constantine said, pulling the baited hook. Gilda hesitated before replying. The Imperial prison has been overflowing in recent days. There is someone I would like freed instead of beheaded, she said calmly. That did not seem like this woman. Under her smiling demeanor was just cold shallowness. One of Antonia's? He asked, digging. Gilda considered her next words before revealing. No, a nephew of mine. He was in classes at the palace. She said it plainly, but it left Constantine shocked. Only children and bastards of the first citizens were educated on the palace grounds. Never would he have guessed the woman in front of him was from that stock. He briefly wondered which family she had been attached to. Gilda continued with a fabricated smile. It is decided, then? Her face slowly morphed from that of an aged fat woman to a younger, leaner version of the same woman. Constantine stepped back, to her amusement. His hand drifted to his gladius. Shit, he thought. It isn't a silver or runic weapon. Intimidated by a young woman. Old man? Gilda said, bemused at his angst. She started stripping off her now oversized clothes and began searching through the piles for something to wear. As she worked, Constantine couldn't help but ask, which is your true body? This slightly younger version still had the same features, so it was likely a spell, but you could never be certain with shape changers. He guessed the spell she was using could only change her age and body shape. A lady never tells, Gilda said with a counterfeit smile. You are no lady, Constantine retorted. He had known her long enough to feel safe in saying that. Agreed, Gilda said dismissively. She then removed her underclothes and dressed in the legionnaire clothes she had found in the mess. He noted this body appeared much fitter than the prior one. The problem Constantine was grappling with was that when she was nearly naked, her body appeared too perfect. He needed her help now, but he would press a silver coin to her flesh if he had the chance. They left together, under the waning glow of Neptune's tear. The shadows seemed to swallow Gilda as she moved, her footfalls non-existent. Constantine wore hound boots that did the same for him. But her silence was clearly an etheric working. They moved together like they had practiced it for a lifetime. Whenever a guard approached, the shadows seemed to shield Constantine as well. It was a useful spell form, whatever it was. Gilda was familiar with the city and quickly led them to the Mage College. They used the Chancellor's secret entryway for access. The college was disturbingly quiet as they moved to the courtyard. 2 Imperial Legionnaires guarded the entrance to the palace grounds. Gilda finally hesitated as they stood in the shadow of the walls. Is there a problem? Constantine asked in the softest whisper. I am trying to decide if killing them will be to our benefit or not, she whispered back. A mage in white robes approached the pair boldly. They were too far away to discern the words, but the conversation was very animated. The irate mage was eventually turned away, denied entrance. They slithered along the wall, approaching the guards, and Constantine assumed she had decided to kill them. When they were within 10 feet, a black hawk squawked and landed on a tree. Gilda slipped past the guards while their attention was diverted. Constantine almost missed his chance to follow. Inside the palace grounds, they quickly moved away. Not bad for an old man, Gilda whispered as they moved toward the immense palace structure. You could have informed me of your intentions. What if I had attacked them? He grumbled. He disliked not being the one in control. Infiltrating the palace was much easier than expected. The patrols were thin on the grounds, with most of the Imperial Legionnaires either dead or still in the field. The palace halls were also empty. Gilda was not appreciative of the numerous sconces holding glowstones in the wide hallways. Without shadows, it was challenging to remain unseen. Fortunately, Gilda knew the palace well, and the pair descended into the bowels of the structure. That went better than anticipated, she finally rasped. We only crossed 3 rooms. Don't look worried, old man. None of them were triggered. A chill went up Constantine's spine. Was Gilda also a skilled mage? We will check the archives first. She turned and led them through a maze of passages. Constantine fought to remember each turn and distance as they went. Just how many times had Gilda been in the palace to be this intimately familiar with it? Maybe she had been educated here as well. The smell of soot and fire started to grow in his senses. Gilda slowed and peered around a corner before boldly walking out. 2 large wooden doors were charred and hanging crookedly on their hinges. The large room beyond was dark, and fumes in the air stung Constantine's eyes as they entered. I will watch the door. Do what you must. Constantine produced his glowstone to reveal piles of charcoal, shattered glass, and outlines of fire-consumed bodies in blackened legionnaire armor. 11 bodies at his first count. The fire had burned hot and fast. The smoke inhalation had likely killed the legionnaires. In the distance, there were still rows of untouched shelves, and he walked quickly toward them. On reaching them, he saw the bottles were coated in a thick layer of dust, topped with a fresh layer of soot. He continued to check more bottles to confirm his suspicions. The newer samples had burned, and these older samples had not been touched. Unfortunately, only a simple catalog number was on each runic jar, and he didn't have a reference. He returned to the entry doors, pocketing his glowstone and half expecting Gilda to have left. Her voice came from the shadows. Satisfied? Never, he shot back. But we can look for your nephew now. Gilda tilted her head and cracked her neck. The holding cells are at the opposite end of the palace. I expect there will be a greater number of sentries since there is actually something to guard there. Constantine decided she knew the palace far too well to not have lived there for a time. They started moving down the brightly lit subterranean corridors. The sound of metal Imperial armor resounded around the corner. Gilda didn't shy away, nodding to Constantine and holding up one finger to denote one guard. He moved ahead of her. He listened and waited. At the right time, he stepped out, his gladius tip going right into the throat of the surprised legionnaire. He lunged, shifting the angle of the blade so it traveled up into the brain. Quickly, he grabbed the legionnaire as he fell, so he wouldn't bleed on the floor, and pulled him away from the exposed corridor. Gilda checked to make sure no one had noticed, and they pulled the body into a storeroom. No blood had stained the marble floor. Constantine left his blade where it was, and unbuckled the man's sword belt. It was not a runic weapon, but it was better than what he was carrying. They were about to leave the room when 2 paired footfalls sounded outside, their owners in the middle of the conversation. He wants all the inventory checked against the books again. 39 artifacts are missing. Someone probably escaped with them in the confusion. We will probably have to question all the prisoners again for the Centurion. Sergius should come down and check them himself. He spends most of his time eating and writing in his notebooks. The footfalls faded away. Don't even think about it, Gilda hissed. We have another objective. After we free him, you can run off and confront Centurion Sergius on your own. He supposed he shouldn't be surprised Sergius was here, as it was far from the fighting. It was much safer than the war front, and he probably wanted to review the imperial treasury before Duke Octavian was elevated to emperor. His desire to confront Sergius raged within him, but he nodded to Gilda. They tailed far behind the 2 imperial legionnaires, heading in the same direction. At one point, the pair of soldiers stopped, turned around, and listened for a time before continuing. While Constantine's footfalls were silent, his armor and clothes were not. Fortunately, they did not come back to investigate. The 2 legionnaires eventually unlocked a large door and entered, closing it behind them. That must be the artifact repository, Constantine voiced softly. Gilda spoke, and the tension in the air was easy to feel. It is, but there are 2 more guards inside, if not more. Are you capable of taking on 4 legionnaires without the benefit of surprise? She quickly raised her hand, signaling for silence. No, don't answer that. We still have a ways to go before we reach the cells. Constantine shrugged and followed. The remainder of their journey was surprisingly uneventful. They encountered no further guards or palace staff. However, upon reaching the cells, they were taken aback to find that the security was lax there as well. A lone, sleepy legionnaire and a pair of men in servant clothing stood by the entrance. Gilda motioned Constantine to remain behind as she walked out into the open. Her confident walk drew the eyes of the 3 watchers. I was sent down to get your order for breakfast. Oats and buttered bread or hard-boiled eggs with biscuits and gravy? The legionnaire started to tense as something gave her away, and Gilda pounced. A dagger appeared in her hand, and she slashed the throat of one of the servants, causing blood to spray across her body. The legionnaire was not slow in drawing his blade, but he never completed the act as Gilda's blade punched into his eye, and she rode him to the ground. The 3rd man was running and screaming silently. Gilda caught him in 4 steps, tackling him. She was weaponless and struggling to choke her victim. Constantine rushed forward to assist, kicking the downed man in the head. Even though he was unconscious, Gilda turned his neck sharply, causing a pop. She must have released the silent spell form. She stood, searching the legionnaire for the keys. They both knew they didn't have much time before they were discovered. The iron-banded door the legionnaire had been guarding opened into a corridor lined with more iron-banded doors, each featuring a small barred window. Gilda began searching each one quickly. Constantine peered into the first, discovering a half-dozen young boys in a miserable state. They were likely children of the first citizens being held hostage, but apparently not who Gilda was looking for. He started checking the cells after Gilda had peered in. Each cell held no less than 4 people, adults and children. Some were dressed in finery, others in undergarments, and others in legionnaire underclothes. The last group was probably made up of legionnaires who could not be trusted in the transition of power. He didn't recognize any faces, though. He paused to question one legionnaire. "Who are you?" The 5 men looked up, fatigue evident in their eyes. "Legionnaires in service to Duke Vito." "Where is your duke?" Constantine asked, formulating a plan. "Held in quarters above," the eldest man said, standing. "Octavian needs his support for the throne. Are you willing to rescue him?" Constantine asked. The men immediately shifted and focused alertly on Constantine. They had killed the guards silently, and none of the prisoners were aware of it. The eldest and apparent leader nodded, but seemed suspicious. Constantine worked his spell form to open the simple lock, since Gilda had the keys. When it clicked, he slid the deadbolt aside and swung the door open cautiously. Stepping back, he allowed the men into the corridor. They seemed to think it was a trap until they saw the dead bodies outside the entryway. They took one tentative step, and then rushed to loot the bodies for weapons to rescue their duke. He doubted that the men were familiar with the palace, or that they would find their duke, but any confusion was good confusion. If he could free more legionnaires, it could only help their escape. 9 more legionnaires were freed, including 2 women. One of the women paused to ask Constantine a question before leaving. "Is Duke Octavian or Centurion Sergius in the palace?" From the vitriol in her voice, he knew why she was asking. Female legionnaires were rare, and he didn't know many. "Do they hold your mage commander or first citizen?" Constantine asked her. "They had her killed for her family's silver mines," the woman spat. Constantine searched his memory. There were only 2 silver mines in the empire. Barons managed both. The Grecos, he guessed. The other mine was far in the southwestern empire, and probably under Orc control by now. The Greco mine had even produced some gold, if he recalled correctly. When he was with Castile's company, they had cleared some kobolds from its depths. The Greco line is dead, and we are sentenced to the Axemen. I would rather spend what remains of my life watching them bleed on the end of my spear. The muscular woman had spirit and fiery eyes, and Constantine liked that. Her younger companion was cradling her arm. "What is wrong with her?" She spoke for herself, her pale blue eyes locking with Constantine's. "My hand was severed and reattached but never healed properly. I still have one good arm, and that is all I need." She didn't possess the same energy as the other woman, but any help was welcome. "Only Sergius is in the palace. Once my companion finds a relative, we can search for him." As I wish his death as well, Constantine said, hoping they would wait for him. They were weaponless and dressed only in underclothes, but they were trained legionnaires. They were anxious but hovered in the entryway to the cells, keeping watch. It was still a time before Gilda returned with an unremarkable teenage boy behind her. They looked nothing alike. "Found what you were looking for?" Constantine asked while studying the boy. Gilda looked at the boy behind her. "I think so. He looks like him and answers to his name, but the last time I saw him was 6 years ago." The boy looked terrified. "What of the others in his cell?" "I left them there," Gilda said, nonplussed. Constantine nodded, as that was probably the safest place for them. "Are we good then?" Constantine inquired, really asking whether their joint endeavor was at an end. "If you leave with us, I can get you out of the palace grounds safely," Gilda offered. Constantine exhaled. "No. Sergius killed my friends and tried to kill me. It is time he paid. Or time for me to visit Pluto's realm." Gilda shook her head, disappointed. Constantine held out his hand to shake, which she considered before extending her own. As their hands touched, she withdrew sharply. "Thought so," Constantine muttered. "Be safe, Gilda." He turned his back on her and put the silver coin he had palmed into his pocket. It appeared Antonia had collected a shape-changer into her service. Reaching the entryway, he collected the 2 legionnaires. Without a guide, they were exploring blindly, but Constantine led them back toward the artifact repository. On the way, they encountered one of the freed prisoners, and 2 Imperial legionnaires twisted together in bloody death. Weapons and some armor pieces had been stripped, but the women still procured greaves and daggers for themselves. Constantine waited while they worked on fitting the straps of the leg guards. The blood pools from the bodies continued to grow, indicating the fight had been very recent. "Why are you 2 still alive?" he asked the pair, curious. "We were captured in the city of Lul. We were portaled here a week ago to be questioned by the Truth Seekers. That happened 4 days ago. They just haven't gotten around to removing our heads since the last 2 axemen died in their sleep." The older woman barked a dark laugh. Constantine grunted, assuming it was Gilda's work. He knelt to help the woman with the limp hand, who was frustrated with the straps holding the metal greaves. "Lose your hand defending your mistress." Almost all female legionnaires ended up guarding a first citizen woman. "A cursed hound took it before killing Celine Greco. He tormented me by reattaching it to highlight my failure," she said angrily. As he finished with the greaves, she introduced herself. "My name is Sylvia, but my friends call me Sylph." Constantine nodded at the introduction but didn't give his name. He also needed clarification. "A hound left you alive? Count yourself blessed by Fortuna's kiss then? Their orders are always to leave no witnesses." He knew Helena. The younger woman jested at her partner. Helena spoke. "He left us alive and with enough coin to flee. We got recognized in Lul when we tried to get Sylph's hand healed." Constantine frowned at the pair's ineptness. It was not difficult to remain unobserved. "Which hound pack left you alive?" He actually doubted their story now. Left alive and with coin? Not even the sentimental hounds he knew would do that. The older woman sensed his doubt and told him the truth. It was just one. No hound hunting pack, and he took most of the wealth Celine had packed. His name was Eric. We were in Legionnaire training together and I kept his head above water. Constantine couldn't help but laugh, putting the 2 on guard. "Okay, that I can believe. Eric would be foolish enough to do that," the one named Helena asked with some aggressive anticipation. "Then he still lives." With a tired voice, Constantine informed them. "If you seek vengeance against him, then I am sorry. He dines with Pluto already." The 2 women looked at each other, unspoken words passing between them. "His blood is also on Sergius' hands, and I look to repay him for it." The 3 spoke no further as they moved deeper into the complex. As they approached the artifact depository, Constantine said, "The Imperial residence should be above us. That is most likely where we will find Centurion Sergius guarded by the loyal Imperial legionnaires. If you flee now, there is still a chance you may escape." Helena just walked past Constantine, taking the stairs up. Sylph followed, shrugging. Echoes of fighting could be heard when they reached a black-and-white marble hallway at the top. The dozen men Constantine had freed would be dealt with before long. Even now, A warning chime was echoing in the halls. The problem was that he needed to figure out where to search, and the element of surprise was gone. Helena tried a nearby door and, finding it locked, shouldered it open. The loud snapping of wood echoed through the hall as the three entered the room. A dim glowstone lit the room. The furnishings indicated that it was one of the many sitting rooms in the palace. Helena was marching to the far wall where several ornamental weapons were on display. They looked exotic, and she took down a polearm, an infantry glaive. She tested the shaft before nodding to herself. Sylph helped herself to a scimitar with a gold pommel, decorated with sapphires. She checked the blade before nodding, and Constantine assumed the weapons had been gifts to emperors over the ages. This would not be the only such display room in the palace. Now better armed, they returned to the hallway. It appeared they were a distance from the conflict, and Constantine knew they were on borrowed time. He paused at a door that had strong light emitting from underneath the bottom edge. It was also locked, and Helena was about to force it open when Constantine held up his hand. He was desperately low on ether, but was familiar with the style of lock. A push of the ether, and the door released, swinging free. He stepped in to see an array of servants huddled on the far side of the room, all petrified. Constantine couldn't believe his luck. Helena was prepared to leave, disgusted. "Where is Centurion Sergius?" Constantine bellowed authoritatively. No one answered, so he tried a threat. "If one of you brings us to Centurion Sergius, you all can live. Are you going to kill him? Are you going to kill him?" A meek young woman asked from the back of the group. There was a thread of hope in her voice, and Constantine knew he had found a guide. It was not long before the three were following the woman through the servant passages, upstairs and down unused hallways. The girl was practically running, fearing that one of the others would send a warning, or that an Imperial Legionnaire would intercept them. She abruptly stopped, out of breath. "A left here and then the doorway at the end of the corridor is the Supreme Chancellor's chamber. He has been staying there, but I do not know if he is there now. There are usually 2 legionnaires standing guard. Is there anywhere else he might be?" Constantine pressed. The young servant's eyes were wild with fear as she shook her head. "Go hide and don't come out for a long time." Constantine looked at his 2 companions and nodded. He peeked around the corner and saw a legionnaire and a hound standing guard. They noticed him too. The hound turned and entered the room, leaving the legionnaire alone. Constantine didn't hesitate and charged. Helena was on his left and Sylph on his right, but much slower. The legionnaire braced his body shield on the ground and readied his blade. The man was a fool. Constantine ran full force at the legionnaire. Their blades rebounded off each other, and then Constantine's body weight hit the shield, forcing the soldier back into the door. With his shield pinning him, Helena's glaive had an unobstructed path to the man's face. He managed to turn his head in time so that the glaive skidded off his helm and into the door. But now he was facing the other direction, and Sylph's blade finished him. Constantine got a spurt of blood on his face as she extracted the scimitar. Constantine pushed the body away and went for the door. It wasn't locked, and he pulled it open, expecting to have to roll away, but no attack came. The ornate room's walls were filled with paintings. A movement to his right caused him to dodge in that direction. He recognized the hound, Hercule, as one of Sergius' trusted seconds. A foul man if there ever was one. Constantine had heard rumors that he tortured and raped his victims when sent on assassination missions. He would be doing the Empire a service by removing him. The door behind him swung open, revealing their target. The pudgy Centurion Sergius stood ready with a runic shield and blade. Recognition and surprise flickered across his features. "Constantine, you should have stayed under whatever rock was hiding you." Sergius's eyes drifted to the barely armored woman beside him as he assessed his odds. Sergius flexed his grip on the sword. Constantine doubted he practiced much anymore. He had consumed his share of essences in his time, but you still needed to practice regularly for the muscle memory to come naturally. Realizing who the women were, Sergius spat. "I see you were responsible for the prisoners escaping. It won't matter. They are probably all dead by now. As you will be shortly." Constantine grinned maliciously. In a more placating tone, Sergius replied, I am sure Octavian can find a place for you. Perhaps you want to take command of the Western Hounds. His hollow offer was met with Constantine sprinting forward. Hercule moved to intercept him, but was engaged by Helena's glaive, which gave Constantine room to circle and engage Sergius. Constantine's sword rang off the shield, his arm instantly going numb. He backpedaled furiously to avoid the swing of Sergius' blade. He switched his blade to his other hand and cursed. Of course, Sergius would be wielding artifacts from the repository. If he lost the use of his other hand, he was dead. At least the two legionnaires were keeping Hercule occupied. He circled Sergius, one arm almost useless from the rebound spell on the shield. The dungeon-forged blade Sergius wielded was likely special too. Constantine knew he was not going to win this fight. After a full circle, he turned and dove at Hercule's back, targeting the hamstring. Sergius rushed to intervene, but it was too late. Constantine didn't do much damage, but even a minor injury to a hamstring in a fight could tilt the odds. Sylph and Helena pressed their advantage while Constantine threw his sword at the charging Sergius. The sword bounced violently off his shield, shattering on its impact with the wall. The shield worked more than once. Constantine drew a knife and took up a defensive stance. Hercule screamed and then gurgled, but Constantine's eyes were locked on Sergius. The scrape of boots told Constantine the women were circling wide. Sergius was backing up, probably wishing he had kept more men to guard his chamber. He chanced a glance at his companions. Sylph was bleeding from a long cut on her bad arm, and Helena had a minor slash above her knee. She handed him Hercule's sword. Together they encircled the sweating Sergius. "Do you want the treasury? Thousands of gold coins? Or maybe all the artifacts you can carry?" He backed toward the room he had exited. Constantine circled and blocked his escape. Feeling began to return to his numb arm, so maybe he hadn't lost it after all. This day just kept getting better. Sergius tried to convince Helena or Sylph to turn on Constantine, but the words were dead on their utterance. Constantine pressed Sergius, giving Helena an opening with her glaive's long reach. They discovered the dungeon-forged blade emitted an arc of lightning on landing a strike. The crack of thunder forced Helena to drop her weapon as her hands smoked, and she was momentarily stunned. They shielded Helena while she recovered. Sergius became panicked and tried to break their circle, but couldn't without exposing himself. It was Constantine who got the first blow on Sergius's shoulder, causing an ether shield to flare. This also gave Sergius a chance to rush to the exit. Gilda was just outside the door, back in her plump older body and dressed in servant clothes. Sergius didn't think the fat old woman was a threat and never saw the blow coming. A stiletto pierced his eye and he grasped at it momentarily before his brain realized he was dead. Seeing Sergius dead, Gilda gave a satisfied nod to Constantine. "You came back for me?" Constantine asked in surprise. You came back for me?" Constantine asked in surprise. "My relation is free of the palace, and I thought I would check on you. I can help you out of the palace if you wish, but the sun is coming, so we need to move soon," she offered with a practiced matronly smile. Constantine considered the offer before nodding. Constantine quickly searched Sergius' body, taking the small coin pouch and handing healing potions to each woman. He pocketed 2 others for himself. Sylph picked up the runic shield and inspected it. "You need to be able to control your aether to use that," Constantine advised. "I can charge a glowstone," Sylph said, and Constantine shrugged. He had already sheathed the dungeon-forged blade on his hip as his prize. In the inner room of the chambers there was a study, and a number of large artifacts lay on the table. All were too big to carry, but he recognized one. The bronze kettle of souls rested apart from them, sitting innocuously on a shelf of books. If he was going to take anything, it would be this, to prevent Octavian from looting Caelora. It had many dents from their exploration of the city and the shimmering labyrinth. Dozens of books lay open. Some were texts and some were message-sending books for Sergius's hounds. He still didn't know the cipher and didn't care to carry them out of the palace. He addressed the women. "Take whatever you want, but we should leave the grounds before sunrise. Our guide outside is anxious. Where do you plan to go?" Constantine asked offhandedly as they prepared to leave the Chancellor's chambers. The women looked at each other, and Helena spoke. "When we got captured, we were on our way to Tigarosia. But Eric said Gramney in the Grand Duchy of Manch was nice this time of year." Constantine paused and murmured to himself, "Did he now?"